Shadow Slave, Chapter 276 to 276, Black Door. 1061 words. The hidden passage led Sunny underground, twisting and turning through the mass of stone. Despite the fact that he had been cautiously walking forward for a few minutes now, Sunny felt that he was still beneath the cathedral. In fact, by his estimation, he was approaching its center. And indeed, right beneath the spot where the statue of the goddess should have been, the narrow passage opened into a larger room. In it, a deep well leading even further down was situated, with a winding staircase spiraling down into the darkness. Sunny frowned. What is it with this place and creepy dark wells? Going further down was going to place him dangerously close to the catacombs. Heck knew all too well what kind of danger that would pose. The last time Sunny had ventured into the maze and tunnels below the city, had barely escaped alive. After hesitating for a while, he stepped onto the staircase and began descending. Deep, ancient shadows surrounded Sunny, giving him a little comfort. At least he was among his kin. After a minute or so of walking down the stairwell, Sunny entered a large chamber that seemed Toba carved into the bedrock, as opposed to being constructed by human hand. On the other side of it, a large door forged from black steel stood, illuminated by two burning torches. Two thoughts entered Sunny's mind simultaneously. The first one was that the metal from which the monolithic door was made looked eerily familiar. It was the same dark, lusterless, impenetrable alloy that the Black Knight had been made of. The second thought was even more disturbing. How come those torches are still burning? Had they been aflame for several thousand years? Come to think of it, the torches looked very strange. They seemed to be producing light, but it was pale and ghostly. There was no heat that came with it, too. The shadows cast by the ghostly flames were the most disturbing, though. Because of the movements of the fire, they were supposed to be dancing on the floor. But instead, the shadows were absolutely motionless. It was asked how the light of the torches had trapped and paralyzed them somehow. Sunny thought for a while, and then ordered his own shadow to stay back. The shadow did not protest. In fact, it was visibly relieved. Taking a few exaggerated steps back, it merged with the deep darkness at the exit of the stairwell and waited there, glancing nervously at the strange motionless shadows from time to time. Sunny cautiously approached the black door and lowered the midnight shard into a protective stance. He was ready to face any sort of danger. But nothing attacked him. The only thing that happened was a sudden chill that ran through Sunny's body when he had entered the circle of light cast by the two ghostly torches. These torches they are definitely some sort of a protective charm. I am almost sure that their power can harm even shadows. The question he had to ask himself, though, was this: were the torches meant to keep something from entering the space that hid behind the black door? Or were they meant to keep something in? Well, there was only one way to find out. What Sunny was doing seemed absolutely crazy. But in fact, it was not. He had not come into this underground chamber just because of idle curiosity or because of being blinded by greed in the prospect of finding a treasure. What led him here and pushed him to study the black door was his intuition. By now, Sunny had to admit that his intuition was more than a mere manifestation of his subconscious. It had turned out to be correct one too many times. Especially ever since he had consumed the drop-officer. After that day, he was able to sense the presence of divinity. And sometimes, he was even drawn to it, like he was drawn to this cathedral into the mysterious key that lay buried in the body of the Lord of the Dead. The two seemed connected, and Sunny felt that he was about to find out how and why. But it was not all his intuition was capable of. There were other aspects to it, too. In fact, Sunny suspected that it had more to do with his fated attribute than it had to do with its spark of divinity. If he were to guess, he would say that after he had been changed by the ichor, that attribute was slightly enhanced, giving him the ability to sense subtle tremors that ran through the strings off it from time to time, the strings that were, apparently, tightly wrapped around his body. The combination of the change that happened to his eyes and his close relationship with those strings gave Sunny a slight affinity to revelations and fate, similar to the one Cassie had possessed, but infinitely less potent. It was enough to guide him to this door and make him want to open it, nevertheless. Stepping close to the monolithic black door, Sunny gazed at it and came to the conclusion that not even an entire army would have been able to break through this monstrous barrier. There was, however, a small keyhole hidden on its dark surface. Pulling on the string tied around his neck, Sunny took off the small metal key that hung on it and gripped it tightly in his hand. After hesitating for a few moments, he carefully inserted the key into the lock of the black door. It fit perfectly. As soon as Sunny put the key into the lock, the faint light of divinity emanated suddenly became a little bit brighter. Sunny sighed, then readied himself and turned the key. Something clicked inside the metal door, and then it silently opened. The pale light of the ghostly torches swayed, as how moved by another worldly wind. Behind the door, a small room was carved into the rock. And in it, a corpse in a dark mantle was chained to the floor inside a circle. Sunny couldn't tell if the corpse belonged to a man or a woman, because there was a strange mask covering its face. The mask was made out of black lacquered wood and carved to resemble the face of a ferocious demon. Its teeth were bared, with 4 fangs protruding from its mouth. The mask was crowned with 3 twisted horns. Inside the black chasms of its eyes, there was nothing but utter darkness. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 277 to 277, Demon of Fate. 1170 words. Sunny held his breath, affected by the disturbing scene in front of him. The corpse was kneeling on the floor of the small cell, its hands chained to the floor. There was a circle carved into the stone around it, with countless symbols that Sunny could not understand surrounding it. However, the circle was broken. In the thousands of years since the fall of the Dark City, the floor of the dungeon cell had cracked, with several fractures running straight through the intricate engraving. Whatever it was the circle was meant to contain had either perished or escaped a long time ago. Now, the only thing that remained was a withered corpse. Coming closer, Sunny took another look at the person who had been imprisoned and died under the ruined cathedral, in a cell situated exactly beneath the statue of the nameless goddess. Because of the dark mantle and the black lacquered mask, Sunny couldn't glean a lot of information about the corpse. It seemed to belong to a human, but other than that, everything about it was a mystery. What terrible sin had this person committed to be condemned to this awful death? Strangely, Sunny's intuition was silent. It was asked how there was nothing in front of him at all. To his sixth sense, the prisoner of the underground cell appeared as an empty space. Single quote. Weird, this person had clearly been either hated or feared a lot to block behind all these barriers. Surely, finding such a creature would affect my fate. Why didn't I feel anything then? With a tense frown, He took a deep breath and carefully stepped inside the circle. It was then that Sunny noticed a chaotic mess of runes drawn on the floor near the price owner's left hand. The sight of them almost sent him into a seizure. Staggering away, Sunny felt Tohi's knees and threw up. Ah, damn it, those runes, those were the same runes the spell used to describe the mysterious unknown. Only here, the intensity of the terrible effect they had on the mind of anyone who saw them was much, much stronger. What the hell? Wiping his mouth, Sunny grimaced and glanced at the masked corpse with a bit of resentment. Then, he picked himself off the floor, took a deep breath, and looked at the terrible runes once again. Immediately, Sunny felt a splitting headache and a sickening, terrible sensation spreading through his mind. It was asked how all his thoughts and memories were being torn and twisted. But despite all of it, Sunny persevered and kept staring at the final message that the prisoner had left behind. Heck knew He couldn't tread the runes, he didn't know that particular language, and the spell either was forbidden, incapable, or refused to translate them. But for some reason, Sunny felt compelled to retreat. Fighting through the intense pain, He slowly studied the strange runes. And then, suddenly, his eyes widened. Because right below the chaotic mess of them, a line of text was written in the script he was familiar with, the usual runic language that the spell always used. This time, it did not provide any translation. Luckily, Sunny had studied these runes and knew enough about them to understand what was written himself. The last thing the person imprisoned under the cathedral wrote before succumbing to death made him shudder. Scratched into the stone was a short prayer. Hail Weaver, demon of fate, firstborn of the unknown. Sunny stared at the runes until he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Only then did he turn away and close his eyes. The nauseating dissonance of the terrible runes stayed carved into his mind. Only after several minutes passed did it fade a little, allowing him to breathe again. So, the mysterious weaver whose forbidden lineage he had inherited was, in fact, associated with fate. Just like Sunny himself. What were the chances? Single quote. That's fated for you, I guess. The word he translated as demon wasn't one used to describe nightmares creatures of the third rank, but a different one. Perhaps calling it a spirit or a demon would have been more suitable, immortal, but powerful and ominous deity. One different from gods, but sharing the same nature. However, Sunny wasn't that versed in mystical terminology. All Heck knew was that the runic language was incredibly rich in words describing all types of monsters and creatures, while the human language wasn't. Hence, demon was fine with him. Apart from the tantalizing revelation about the mysterious weaver, he had noticed one other important thing by forcing himself to study the runes. Before, Sunny had thought that there was a single entity that the spell refused to call by its name and simply described as unknown, leading him to call it the unknown. Yes, Sunny was not that imaginative when it came toward choice. Whether the unknown were a kind of beings, a single existence, or a force of nature, he did not know. But now, he realized that there were actually two types of forbidden runes, and two things that the spell did not know how or did not want to mention. One was the same astos used in the description of the drop of ichor, which stated that the vile thieving bird was hated both by the gods and by the unknown. It also said that the reflection of the unknown stayed forever frozen in the depths of weaver's pupils, and that just looking at it drove the thieving bird mad. The other was the same astos used in the description of the stone saint, which was created by the last child of the unknown, and now here by the dead prisoner, who had called Weaver the firstborn of the unknown. What the hell is all of this supposed to mean? His suspicion that Weaver had something to do with the creation of the nightmare spell only grew stronger after learning that they had something to do with the domain of it. After all, the spell seemed to be weaved out of numerous strings off it, and there was this being called Weaver, who had the blood of gods in their veins, but was also somehow connected to the unknown. Feeling his headache only growing stronger, Sunny winced and shook his head. Later, I will think about it later. There would be time to ponder about all this later. Or not, he's trying to escape the forgotten shore. Either way, that time was not now. Turning back to the chained corpse, Sunny cautiously avoided looking at the dangerous runes and kneeled in front of it. He wanted to talk now what was hiding behind the mask. But as soon as she touched it, the corpse suddenly shattered and fell apart, turning into dust right in front of his eyes. Even its dark mantle rotted and disappeared, asked how the thousands of years that had passed since the fall of the Dark City and the destruction of the cathedral finally caught up with it. Soon, all that was left was apple of dust. And the lacquered mask lying on top of it, its black surface glinting slightly in the pale light of the ghostly torches. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 278 to 278, Weaver's Mask. 1114 words. Sunny looked at the black mask in the darkness hiding in its eyes. Its features were not as much contorted as fearsome by nature. It was simultaneously fearsome and somber, bestial and regal, asked how existing at the border of all things. But most of all, the striking mask radiated a sense of mystery. The vicious fangs, the twisting horns, the black lacquered wood of it all. Once again, his intuition was silent. There was nothing helpful toward the black mask, asked how it didn't even exist. How strange. Sunny waited for a few moments, then picked up the mask and brought it to his face to take a closer look at it. But just a moment after his fingers touched the sleek surface of the polished wood, the mask suddenly disintegrated into a swarm of countless white sparks. Acting like water, the stream of light flowed toward Sunny's chest and entered into his body, disappearing into the dark depths of his shadow core. The voice of the spell thundered suddenly, louder than it had ever been before. You have received a memory. Sunny remained motionless for a few seconds, thinking about what just happened. By now, Heck knew that some memories could exist outside of the soul cores, just like how shard memories did. Was the black mask one of them? Somehow, Heck felt that it wasn't. Why I am even guessing. Let's just take a look. The reason he was lingering was because of the magnitude of the situation. Sunny didn't know anything about the mysterious mask, but Heck believed that this relic of the past was truly unusual. The circumstances that had led to its discovery were too extraordinary, and the place it was hidden in was too uncanny to think otherwise. So he was understandably apprehensive. With avid attention, Sunny dove into his soul sea and looked up at spheres of light floating around the black sun of the shadow core. There was a new one there, which seemed to be much brighter than the rest. Summoning it down, He soon found himself looking into the eyes of the dark mask that hovered in front of him. It was asked how he was facing an invisible person wearing it. Shifting uncomfortably, Sunny lowered his gaze a little and looked beneath the black lacquered wood. A moment later, he had to suppress the involuntary desire to cover his eyes with a hand. Inside the black mask, 7 radiant embers were burning with such intensity that it almost blinded him. All around them, incalculable ethereal strings were weaved into a pattern so vast and intricate that it almost seemed boundless. 7 anchors, gods. Stunned by the visage of the mask's spellweb, Sunny hesitated for Abbott and summoned the runes that described it. What Hessa made him take a step back and gasp. Memory, Weaver's mask, memory rank, divine, memory tier, 7, memory type, tool, memory description. Weaver believed that knowledge was the origin of power and so always hid behind numerous lies, wearing them as a mantle. No one knew Weaver's thoughts, Weaver's face, and Weaver's heart. Even the gods could not see what hid behind the mask. Memory enchantments, mantle of lies, simple trick. Sunny had to look away for a moment to take a breath. Divine memory of the 7th tier, holy hell. Words weren't intended to describe his astonishment. He was, however, surprised to see that the mask only had 3 enchantments. Sunny expected such a powerful memory to have dozens of them. Judging by how boundless and insanely complicated the weave of it was, there had to be that much, at least. Just what were these 3 enchantments to require a myriad of diamond strings to support them? Turning back to the runes, he concentrated on the enchantments and read further. Enchantment, mantle of lies. Enchantment description, hides the identity of its master. That description sounded very simple, but looking at the spell weave of the black mask, Sunny could tell that this enchantment was anything but. In fact, it was so vast and powerful that his mind was failing to even comprehend the scale of it. The enchantment was indeed designed to protect the identity of the person wearing the mask from prying eyes, but what it actually meant was that any form of detection was powerless against it. And Sunny suspected that any was not a figure of speech in this case, but simply a constatation of fact. For example, Cassie's suspectability, which allowed her to see a person's attributes, would not work on someone wearing the mask. There were countless similar abilities among the awakened, none of which would work either. I guess that explains why my intuition was silent about the prisoner and the mask itself. Whatever kind of it related 6th sense I have also countered by that thing. Even more terrifying was the fact that the enchantment was not aimed at just the awakened. The description of the Weaver's mask stated that even the gods could not see through it, and it was honest truth. Nothing could penetrate the barriers of the mantle of lies, not even the sight of a god. Sunny gulped. Single quote. Scary. But then, this incredible and frightening enchantment did not even take a tenth of the volume of the ethereal diamond strings hiding beneath the surface of the black lacquered mask. The second enchantment was much the same. It was called by which the spell was telling Sunny that it wasn't going to say anything about it. Its description was also empty. However, Sunny could tell that it had something Toto would cite just by looking at the weave. Heck could also tell that it was not a passive enchantment, but an active one, meaning that currently, he could not access it. Usually, that would mean that he would be able to have become a true awakened, but in this case, the amount of soul essence required to keep the enchantment activated for more than a fraction of a second was so vast that no awakened would have been able to. Only a saint would, perhaps. However, Sunny was not sure that he wanted to tree even if had the ability. The things Weaver saw were capable of driving unholy creatures insane, so it was wise to avoid going anywhere near that enchantment in the future, most likely. Most of the spell weave of the Weaver's mask, however, was dedicated to the third enchantment, one that was called a simple trick. Judging by the mind-boggling complexity of the pattern that made it possible, that trick of Weaver's was anything but simple, though. It was the most bizarre, intricate, and ingenious thing that Sunny had ever seen. Curious, he glanced at the description, and froze, his eyes opened wide. The runes gleaming in the air read, enchantment, simple trick, enchantment description, reverses the effect of phone's flaw. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 279 to 279, Guilty Conscience. 1081 words. Sunny remained silent for a long time, staring at the black mask. The tranquil sea of his soul was still and silent, not at all like the storm that was currently raging in his heart. After a while, he thought, that Weaver was one sly guy, girl, person, being. Well, the fact that I didn't even know that much only serves to prove the point. And it thought I was good at deceit and manipulation. How devious one must bet not let even the gods, even the nightmare spell know anything about them. But it was fitting, a strange kind of way. If Weaver's domain was that off it, there was no other way. Fate was a terrifying, but subtle tool. Manipulating it to your advantage required a very special kind of genius, one that was directly opposite Tony kind of directness, straightforwardness, and brutal power. However, if given the choice, Sunny would have preferred to face war god in battle than to make someone like Weaver his enemy. Masterful liars were far more dangerous than deadly warriors. Heck knew it better than most. Exiting the soul sea, Sunny hesitated for a little and then summoned the Weaver's mask. The cool wooden surface of the mask appeared on his face, held in place by some invisible force. Immediately, his vision changed slightly. Everything became sharper, clearer, more vivid. Sunny could feel the mask reaching into his eyes and connecting to something, the strange legacy he had inherited by consuming the drop-off Weaver blood. He sensed his intuition becoming more potent, too. It was asked how he could almost see the mysterious strings off it that span across the entire world. Almost. Glancing at the pile of dust that remained of the prisoner, Sunny frowned slightly. The identity of the person who had been wearing the Weaver's mask remained a secret. Just who had this corpse belonged to, and how had they ended up chained to the floor in a hidden dungeon cell beneath the majestic cathedral? The easiest thing to assume was that it was Weaver themselves, but Sunny dismissed that theory immediately. From everything Heck knew about the original master of the mask, the power of that creature was just below that of the gods, and that of the unknown, perhaps. If Weaver appeared on the Forgotten Shore, the whole Dark City would have been wiped out of existence before any harm was done to them. So who could have been wearing Weaver's mask? Some powerful carrier of the nightmare spell that had received a toss of memory, just how Sunny did. Well, if Weaver was really a demon, which was a strange kind of phallus or deity, was there a cult dedicated to them? Had there been priests and followers of Weaver? The message the prisoner had left behind sounded awfully close to a prayer. Had that person been deemed a heretic and condemned to this place for that reason? Sunny sighed. There was no way talk now. Hesitating for habit, had turned away and left the somber dungeon cell behind. He only had this one day to finish all the things he had left undone in the dark city. There was no time for fruitless pondering. Once outside, Sunny walked over to the place where he had left his shadow and took a look at himself through its eyes. What Hessa made him blink a couple of times. The black lacquered mask sat snugly on his face, hiding his features. He couldn't even see his eyes, which were drowned in darkness. What's more, even his height was somehow unclear. Sunny didn't actually become taller, but from the side, it looked ass-how-headed, sort of. 1 second, ITDID, and the next one, ITDID not. It was sort of similar to how people's faces change when lighted from different directions. In any case, he couldn't tell for sure how tall the person facing the shadow was. How fun. It was not that Sunny became completely unrecognizable, though. He would still have to be careful to hide the context clues about himself while wearing the mask. Mundane things like the way he walked, his usual mannerisms, and other subtle but unique details of his behavior could still betray his identity despite the fact that it was masked from all unnatural means of detection. To truly make himself appear as something else, Sunny would have to put on a performance. Good thing he was practicing the shadow dance, then. Was it not designed to fully imitate someone else's battle style and physicality? What a wonderful coincidence. Finally, the moment he had been dreading came. It was time to test if the simple trick was really capable of turning his flaw upside down. Needless to say, Sunny was nervous. His lips became dry, and he unconsciously tried to lick them, but now there was a mask on his face, so it couldn't. That bad habit of his had to be put to rest, apparently. Single quote. Great, alright, let's stop this. Opening his mouth, Sunny said out loud. I am very tall. In the process, he grimaced, expecting the familiar pain to invade his mind. But there was nothing. Sunny froze, blinked a couple of times, and waited. Still, nothing happened. Beneath the mask, a wide grin appeared on his face. I am not only tall, but also exquisitely handsome. But that is not all. I am incredibly honest and nice, too. Every girl I meet immediately falls in love with me. Boys, too. That's just how lovable, handsome, nice and tall I am. Everything I have just said is absolutely true. His mind was peaceful and quiet. There was no pain, no pressure. In fact, Sunny felt great. Wow, feeling an almost overwhelming desire to continue spouting lies, hell often exhilaration. Amazing, this can be. But then, a tremendous explosion of pain suddenly threw him to the ground. With a startled yelp, Sunny grasped his head and then groaned through gritted teeth, feeling asked how it was about to burst. What the hell? He just wanted to say how useful the ability Tolly could be. Wait, the ability Tolly would, indeed, be very useful. Which meant that by stating that fact, he would be telling the truth. And the weaver's mask did not remove his flaw, just reversed it. So, it seemed like while wearing it, Sunny could not tell even a word of truth. That seemed like the right conclusion to make. But he needed to test it to be absolutely sure. With a doomed sigh, Sunny waited for a moment and then said. My name is. A moment later, another pain scream resounded in the darkness of the underground chamber. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 280 to 280. One last job. 1079 words. Sometime later, Sunny emerged from the ruins of the cathedral with a rucksack on his shoulder, took one last look back, and left. Whatever his future was going to be, he doubted that he would come back here anytime soon. It was a bittersweet goodbye. Cautiously walking through the familiar streets of the dark city, where Heck knew every turn and every piece of rubble, in this district of it, at least, Sunny kept his guard up. Many things must have changed in the months he had been away traveling through the labyrinth. The nightmare creatures Heck knew and, more importantly, knew how to avoid might have wandered away or perished, and new horrors might have taken their place. He had to stay prudent and careful. But still, his next and final goal was not that far away. As Snake toward it, Sunny thought about the weaver's mask and the ways it could change his life. At first, he thought about simply never taking it off and walking around while delivering Adeluge fleas. This way he would be safe from revealing his most guarded secret and becoming someone's life, at least. But after considering this seriously, Heck came to the conclusion that it was not the best decision in his current circumstances. First of all, one couldn't be part of any collective while lying all the time. Sunny had an unpleasant experience of being expelled from various groups for various reasons, and not being sincere and honest was one of the surest ways to make people want to avoid you at all cost, eventually, at least. And no one was able to survive alone in the dream realm. Not in a way that a person would want to live, anyway. Sunny knew a lot about this side of things, too. But most importantly, he was not going to be able to keep this lying for long, anyway, not when dealing with people that already knew him. Kai and Cassie would notice the strange effect of the mask immediately. Kai because of his ability to sense lies, Cassie because her ability to see attributes would suddenly stop working. But others would catch on that something strange was going on with him pretty quickly, too, simply because of how drastic the change in his behavior would be. Especially nephews, who knew him so well. After that, they would inevitably have a lot of questions, and answering those questions, even with lies, would put him in more danger than he already was in. So, sadly, Weaver's mask was not Apanacia to Sunny's current situation. At best, it would be able to help him avoid certain predicaments ifused sparingly. But really, he didn't want anyone talk now that he was in possession of that memory at all. Sunny had to think of the future. Ifei was lucky enough to survive the fall of the Bright Castle and return to the real world. That was where the Black Mask could create miracles for him. It would allow him to have a hidden persona that was in a way connected to an awakened named Sunless, and Asik, allow him to do and achieve things that would have been impossible or too dangerous to Triash himself. To that effect, no one could know that the strange black wooden mask was connected to him, not even people whom he, somewhat, trusted. Both for his own good and theirs. Itisik apity, though. It was. Just imagining Castor space if you were to ever learn about what type of treasure Sunny had somehow found this time was tempting enough to change his plans. Castor. Sunny's face darkened. He had not forgotten about the promise Nephies had made him at the start of their journey to the Hollow Mountains. Tomorrow, he was finally going to learn what was the deal with the proud legacy, and what exactly the relationship between Changing Star and him was. And how big were the chances of Sunny having to face Castor in battle. Despite all his dislike for the handsome scion of the Han Lickland, Sunny was reluctant to actually fight him. No matter how much progress he had made to get ready for the bloody conclusion of this disastrous chapter of his life, Castor was still not someone to be taken lightly. He was a tremendously deadly opponent just based on what Sunny knew about him. And there were secrets that the legacy had been keeping, as well. That charm of his, what does it do? He was certain that he would defeat Castor if push came to shove. But the cost he would have to pay for that victory would be heavy. Perhaps much more heavy than he was willing to pay. Suddenly uneasy, Sunny silently shook his head and continued on his way. As Sun began to roll toward the western horizon, he approached his goal, the ruins of an ancient library that stood lonesomely among the decimated buildings. Back near the end of his lonely months of hunting monsters on the streets of the Dark City, Sunny had begun exploring this ruin for bits of information about the history of the Forgotten Shore. Because of his chance encounter with the Stone Saint, and then with Kai, which led to him abandoning the ruins for a long expedition into the labyrinth, he had never finished this project. There was this one vast mosaic, in particular, that Sunny was interested in. It sprawled across the entire floor of the library's main hall and was mostly covered by rubble. In the past, Sunny was not strong enough to move the rubble out of the way. He had been hoping to make the Stone Saint do it for him, but sadly, the shadow was currently slumbering in the depths of his shadow core, evolving into whatever it was she was going to turn into. Just Tobusser, He checked one more time to see if the mysterious process was still going, and sighed in disappointment. Luckily, he had grown much stronger himself during these months. Sunny was pretty sure that now, he would be able to clear the mosaic with his own 2 hands. It was just going to be a lot of work. Sending his shadow into the library to make sure that no abomination had made its nest there during his absence, Sunny entered the cool shadow of the ruin inside. Single quote. Better get started. Soon, the scraping sound of heavy boulders being moved could be heard under the partially collapsed roof of the ancient building. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 281 to 281. 7 Heroes. 1,000 words. In the depths of the night, Sunny was finally done with the arduous task of clearing the floor of the ruined library. Tiredly standing in the center of the circular hall, he found himself in the middle of a vast mural. The mosaic had endured the passage of time in an almost pristine condition. Most of it was preserved perfectly, with only a few small sections destroyed by corrosion or the ill will of the creature that inhabited the Crimson Spire. By now, Sunny was certain that it was the terror of the Forgotten Shore that had obliterated any depictions of the 7 heroes' faces. He didn't know how it was possible, but felt that the same furious force that had decapitated the ancient statues was responsible for the damage done to the engravings in the ancient mine and Toth's mural. It was asked how the terror wanted to erase any sign of the founders of the Starlight Legion from history. Their names were forgotten, every person that had known of their stories turned into dust, and even the stones that bore their image were desecrated and shattered. How great the resentment that the evil creature harbored toward them must have been, for it Ogotosic links in its mad desire to obliterate their legacy. With ASIGH, Sunny turned slightly and walked to the edge of the mural. He was searching for the Stardo FITS story. Depicted on the mural was not one image, but a long series of them, spiraling from the edges of the mosaic to its center like a long scroll. On them, the history of the land consumed by darkness was shown, ending with the coming of a new dawn. Sunny already knew what events had brought the curse of all-consuming darkness to the Forgotten Shore and how the ancient inhabitants of this land fought against all odds to resist it. Now, he was going to learn the final mystery, the reason for their eventual downfall. Finding the first image, Hestudid Itand lingered for Abbott. Then, he walked on, watching the history unfurl itself beneath his feet. As curse subdued the world under the veil of everlasting darkness and terrible creatures started to attack the human settlements, one after another, mighty champions began to appear to battle them. But no matter how strong, brave, and valiant those champions were, none of them was able to resist for long. Especially not when their own allies started turning into monsters. It was impossible to face the terrifying foes hiding in the darkness when no one was there to cover your back, or even worse, if those you trusted the most Totoso are the ones delivering a deadly blow instead. But still, humanity persisted. Months passed, then years. And eventually, a new generation grew up in this horrible world. Born in the all-consuming darkness, 7 valiant heroes gave on oath to return the light to the cursed land. Sunny whispered, the people who would later create the Starlight Legion were indeed born in the darkness. They never even saw the light that they would swear to bring back. All they knew of it were the tales their elders had told them, tales of a time when people never turned into nightmares, and the beautiful stars shone even in the darkest of nights. This new generation grew up surrounded by nothing but darkness and horror, and was forged by Itinto a far more fearsome force than their parents had ever been. Hard times created hard people, and their time was as unforgiving and harrowing as one could imagine. Beyond so, even, and so, the people IT created adapted to match this dark reality. Eventually, 7 of them rose above the rest, each leading their faction in the constant battle against the encroaching doom. Sunny stopped and studied the image that showed all 7 of them, even if their faces were damaged beyond recognition. There was a knight in an intricate plate armor forged of white metal, with a stalwart blade grasped firmly in his hands. A graceful priestess in a light flowing robe, her delicate hands shining with gentle light. A mighty hunter in an archaic cuirass leaning on a beautiful bronze spear. A masterful builder holding a massachammer in his calloused hands. A regal lord with a humble crown resting on his head, a single gem decorating its simple design. A subtle and merciless slayer with a ghostly stiletto hidden cunningly behind her back. And a stranger from a misty land who wore a stone-like armor and never showed his face, with a heavy round shield resting at his feet. Sunny looked at the 7 heroes, thinking, knight, hunter, lord, stranger, slayer, builder, and priestess. Midnight Shard, Zenith Shard, Dawn Shard, Dusk Shard, Moonlight Shard. And the other 2, Sunlight Shard and Starlight Shard. The fate of the last 2 Shard memories remained unknown to him. Nephis must have known something, though. Otherwise, she would not have ventured into the dangerous expedition to the Hollow Mountains to seek out the Crown of Dawn. Although the history of the Forgotten Shore was presented in more detail here, did not give him any revelations yet. Thoughtful, Sunny turned away from the image of the 7 heroes and continued on. At some point in history, the heroes came together, created the Starlight Legion, and united the surviving remnants of humanity under its banner. It was also then when they gave their defiant oath. They must have been mad. Wasn't striving to achieve something impossible the definition of madness? Sunny frowned, knowing full well that, in this case, the 7 heroes actually managed to fulfill their crazy ambition. It was all a little too close to home. Helso knew someone who liked to set impossible goals and had an infuriating track record of proving them possible. But how did it all end? Yes, the heroes achieved their dream. But the Forgotten Shore still turned into a desolate hell. What happened to their light? Looking at the next images of the mosaic, Sunny got a feeling that he was about to find out. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 282 to 282, Sacrifice. 1093 words. As Sunny walked in circles, drawing near to the center of the mosaic, he saw the depiction of various deeds that the Starlight Legion had achieved. The warriors led by the 7 heroes were truly a fearsome force. Forged and tempered by the relentless malice of their dark world and the unassailable will of their leaders, they drowned the Forgotten Shore in the blood of the cursed creatures. Even though many of them had turned into monsters themselves, especially those who had allowed themselves to falter in their conviction, the rest continued on, unbroken. Sunny couldn't tell how powerful exactly the members of the Legion were, but from some clues of their battles, he guessed that they were at approximately the same level as Awakened of his own world, at least at the beginning. With time, however, it seemed as how the warriors of the Cursed Land had grown much stronger. If most of the creatures they were fighting were of the corrupted rank, then that would put the Legion far above the humans back in the real world. Sunny wasn't sure if the 7 heroes and their soldiers were carriers of the Nightmare spell, though, and if the same hierarchy of power could be applied to them. Eventually, the surviving humans migrated to the shore of the colossal impact crater and built an impregnable wall around their new city. This endeavor alone was tortuous and ambitious that he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Sunny slowed his steps. Once the images in front of him, the construction of the Crimson Spire, no, it wasn't crimson yet back then, had begun. The Cyclopean Tower was built west of the city, reaching high into the sky like annexus of the world. Like a stairwell that was designed to allow humans to touch the heavens. This was what he was truly interested in. Sunny wanted to talk now what happened in the spire, how the artificial sun was created, and how the darkness that consumed this land was turned into a transient black sea. What he saw next made him falter, and then close his eyes with an expression of deep, exhausted resentment. In the second to last image, the 7 heroes were depicted standing apart in the 7 spots of the Forgotten Shore. In front of each of them, a crowd of thousands of people kneeled, waiting. Among those people were the warriors of the Legion and the civilians from the city, men and women, old and young. Each of the heroes held a weapon in their hands. Of course, this is what happened. What else would it be? A feeling of dark, bitter disappointment grasped his heart. Sunny didn't even know why he felt this way. It was not like he knew anything about the 7 heroes, really. But at some point, maybe because he needed to believe that there was a tiny glimmer of light in the vast and endless night, he had begun thinking of the Masa symbol of the best humanity could be. What a foolish thought. He of all people should have known better. Curse you all. In the last image, one that took the center of the mosaic, 7 tall hills made of dead bodies surrounded the spire. Tens of thousands of people had been slaughtered, their blood flowing like rivers toward the dark tower. On top of each hill stood one of the valiant heroes, their hands stained red to the shoulder. As last sacrifice, the slaughterers turned their weapons on themselves, thrusting them into their hearts. And somewhere out there, heck knew, a tiny black seed floated in a pool of blood. Sunny grimaced in disgust. This was your dream. This I show you decided to bring back the light. You sick wretches. As rivers of blood flowed to the spire, 7 streams of glowing crimson light moved above them and entered it from 7 directions. These streams represented the soul essence of numerous humans who had been sacrificed to create the artificial sun. But theirs wasn't the most terrible fate. In the center of the spire, a lone human figure was drawn, convulsing in harrowing agony as raging storm of soul energy entered her body. The conflux of all that power, the sacrificial vessel meant Tobate's conduit. The anchor of the sun. Sunny recognized that figure, too. Tohim, the features off her face were painfully familiar. It was the same face as that of the nameless goddess whose statue stood in the ruined cathedral. The crimson light entered her body and shot from her screaming mouth and eyes upward, pure and white. It rose to the height of the spire, where a new sun was being born. Frightened by its light, the darkness retreated underground, where it was locked behind 7 seals that were left behind by the heroes as their last deed. The rest was easy to deduce. After the heroes perished to create the artificial sun, everything was fine for a while. But then, maybe after a few decades, or even hundreds of years, the light of the sun began totem. Some people of the Dark City had to make a new sacrifice. Perhaps, the second time, only 7 people had been killed to knew the power of the spire. But then it happened again, and that time, 7 was not enough. Sabi sacrificed 14, and when it happened again, they sacrificed a few dozen. And eventually, hundreds of people were being slaughtered every year to keep the sun burning. Because of the simple fact that the 7 heroes and their people, all of them had terribly mighty souls. But their descendants, who didn't have to grow up in utter darkness and fight terrible monsters to live through the day, did not. And at some point in this vicious cycle, the vessel that had been imprisoned in the spire and served as anchor for the bloodthirsty sun was corrupted. Whatever kind of conscience it had left had been completely shattered. The nameless goddess of the Dark City became the crimson terror of the Forgotten Shore. All that pain, all that rage, all that blood exploded from the spire and infected the very land itself, growing into an endless labyrinth of the strange crimson coral. The 7 seals came undone, releasing the darkness that had been imprisoned underground for hundreds of years. This was what Cassie had seen in the vision. The darkness and the fury of the newborn terror fell on the humans of the Dark City like a tide and wiped them all out, erasing even the memory of them from the face of the world. This was how the Forgotten Shore was born. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 283 to 283, final piece of the puzzle. 992 words. Sothis Ishoitis. Sunny stared at the last image of the mosaic, a dark and resentful expression frozen on his face. Depicted in the center of the mural, acid fueled by blood shone on the mountains formed by dead bodies. Tens of thousands of people had been slaughtered to create it, and thousands more must have been butchered later on to keep it burning in the indifferent sky. The first sacrifices had died willingly, lured into submission by their fanatical rulers. What about those who came after? Somehow, Sunny doubted it. And for what? How did Edel end? The 7 seals had been broken, and the ancient civilization had been obliterated. But the sun created and nurtured by it was not destroyed, just corrupted. It still rose in the morning and fell beyond the horizon after the dusk, illuminating the desolate hell of its own creation. Aslan Osset's vessel, the terror of the Crimson Spire, existed at the center of the labyrinth. It would continue to shine in the cold gray skies. And Aslan Osset did. The darkness that had escaped its underground prison and turned into the cursed sea was going to continue coming and going, scared of its light. Great. The two deserve each other. He didn't know why the all-consuming darkness had become a literal sea of impenetrably black water, but had a guess or two. Either hundreds of years spent locked away behind the seals had affected it that way, or the artificial sun had. The terror had been changed by the curse, so he couldn't the curse be changed by the terror in return. Why wasn't that sun extinguished, though? There was no one alive on the Forgotten Shore to make sacrifices to the spire anymore, but Sunny suspected that there was a reason for why the crimson coral seemed to grow either out of or toward bones. Ifei was right. The whole labyrinth was a Janma with which the terror absorbed the soul essence of every creature that bled on the coral before it died. It was all a part of its body. Sunny shivered, realizing that both the labyrinth and the dark sea were, in fact, colossal living creatures. It was just that the scale of them was so boundless that they seemed like forces of nature. Compared to the eternal struggle of the two titanic beings, the struggle of a handful of tiny humans was nothing short of insignificant. Or was it? Suddenly, Hef frowned. What about Neffy's and her plan? How did the shard memories come into all of this? At first, a dark thought entered his mind. He imagined that Changing Star was preparing a mass sacrifice off her own. Ahecatomb to appease the Crimson Terror. The number of the sleepers being sent to the Forgotten Shore each year was too eerily similar to the number of sacrifices made to the Crimson Spire by the inhabitants of the Dark City to be simple coincidence. But he quickly dismissed that thought. After all, the sacrifices were meant to renew the power of the Blood Sun, and that was not Neff's goal. If anything, she meant to destroy it and send for all to gain entry to the gateway hidden in the spire. So, what did Edel mean? Sunny scowled, remembering every piece of information about the 7 heroes and their cursed land Heck knew. And most importantly, those that came directly from the spell. After a while, he muttered, quote, Time has erased their names and their faces, but the memory of the Defiant Oath still remains. This was the second part of the description that the spell had given the Starlight Legion armor. His eyes widened. All this time, he thought that this sentence simply meant that the legacy of the 7 heroes lived on even after their deaths. But now, he suddenly realized that the truth might have been far more straightforward. The key to understanding the secret of the shard memories was right in front of him this whole time. In fact, it came from the first memory he had ever gotten on the Forgotten Shore. The Azure Blade. Want this Forgotten Shore, only steel remembers, he whispered, a sudden understanding dawning on him like a revelation. The memory of the Defiant Oath remained, and only steel remembered. Sunny rubbed his face. I am sick a fool. Everything he needed to learn the truth had been at his disposal from the very start of it all. The heroes were long gone, but their terrible oath was still here, preserved in cold steel. It was not the memory of it that remained, but the memory. The shards were that memory. Of course, Edel makes so much sense now. But then, what was their purpose and why was Neffy so motivated to find each one? That was easy to guess, too. Cassie had basically told him, all those months ago. Quote, In the end, I saw a colossal, terrifying Crimson Spire. At its base, 7 severed heads were guarding 7 locks. In its fury, the terror of the Crimson Spire had beheaded the statues of its creators and brought their heads astrophies to guard the entrance to its lair, where Cassie had seen them, as well as 7 mysterious locks. What did a lock need? A key. All locks required a key to either open them or shut them closed. Sunny slowly exhaled. The 7 seals that kept the all-consuming darkness locked underground came undone, but they weren't destroyed. iPhone had all the keys. It was still possible to seal the cursed sea once again. That was what the 7 heroes had left behind. And with the cursed darkness locked away, the spire would lose its most deadly line of defense. Finally, everything became clear. Sunny remained motionless for a long time, looking at the bloody images beneath his feet. After a while, he sighed and turned away. There was a bitter taste in his mouth. Quote, Sick. I am sick of this place. So sick of all of this. Cassie's vision showed her fire in rivers of blood. Good. It could all burn to the ground. He didn't care anymore. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 284 to 284. Nothing serious. 1003 words. In the cold light of dawn, Sunny approached the spot where the other members of the cohort and he agreed to meet. The Shadow had already located their camp in the ruin of an ancient building and was currently watching them, hidden in the darkness. The 5 youths were busy preparing for the last stretch of the way to the Bright Castle. They were calm and collected, not at all like people who were about to face the horrifying wrath of the Bright Lord. What kind of horror had they not faced already? Climbing over the rebel, Sunny let Neffys and the rest know of his approach and jumped down. Landing just a few meters away from the group, Hess straightened his back and gave them an indifferent look. Hey, they greeted him in a reserved manner. A palpable tension permeated the air, making everyone reluctant to speak too much. Only Effie was seemingly unaffected by this dark mood. Leaning on a stone wall, the huntress was enthusiastically gnawing on a juicy bone. Her white teeth were effortlessly crushing it into tiny pieces, which were then chewed and swallowed along with the marrow. Noticing Sunny, she smiled. Hey, doofus, heck of her Annette and wanted to turn away, but then noticed a slight frown that appeared on Effie's face. Looking at them with avid uncertainty, she asked, you alright? Sunny was silent for a few moments, then smiled. Finally, he said in an even tone, I'm perfect. Leaving the doubtful huntress behind, he walked past Castor and approached Neffys. The Changing Star was standing with her back to the group, looking up at the silhouette of the bright castle that loomed in the distance. Hearing his steps, she turned around. The gentle light of dawn reflected in her eyes, making them appear to shine. Quote dot dot dot. You've made it, Sunny. I am glad. He shrugged. Why, you didn't expect me to show up. She was silent for a while, and then looked away. A lock of silver hair fell on her eyes. Neffy's tucked it behind her ear and sighed. Could I knit? It's not like I know the future. After that, she smiled. Single quote dot dot dot. Amusing. In the 11 months they had spent on the Forgotten Shore, this was only the second time Sunny heard Changing Star tell a joke, and the first time it was actually funny. If a little macabre, but what was the harm in indulging in a bit of dark humor, at this point? Sunny did not return the smile, however. Glancing in the direction of the bright castle, he hissed. So, what is the plan? Neffy shrugged. This time there is no plan. We have confirmed that Gunlog is still pretending to be looking for Effie to bring her to justice for killing the missing guards. Once we enter the outer settlement, the members of the host will come for her. Then, I will most likely be forced to challenge him. We'll see after that. Sunny looked at her with a dark expression. Pretty much exactly what I expected. Head into the city to ask, can you really break his armor? Even with the Dawn Shard, your sword ice barely equal Tone ascended memory. And that thing Issa true transcended echo. She lingered for a while before answering. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and even. I didn't have to break the armor. I just have to break the man. Sunny shook his head with a humorless smile. Good luck achieving one without the other. He paused for a moment, and then said without a hint of levity in his voice. Anyway, you owe me a conversation. Changing Star glanced at them, then nodded. All right, but not here. With that, she gave the others a sign to wait and walked away. Sunny followed. His shadow stayed, making sure that no one was going to tree and eavesdrop on them. It was staring directly at Castor, following his every move with intense attention. As they were walking, Sunny suddenly said, by the way, I have something to tell you, too. Neffys glanced at them and slightly raised an eyebrow. Yes, what is it? Sunny was silent for habit. Then, Hesmalt, oh, it's nothing serious. Do you remember a guy called Harper? She frowned, then shook her head. Should I? Who-ish? Sunny shrugged. His expression remained neutral. Just a guy that I called. He was one of Gunlog's spies. Neff looked at them for a few moments, then asked with indifferent confusion. What about him? A slight shadow ran over Sunny's face. However, his smile remained exactly the same. Quote dot dot dot. No, nothing. Just wondered if you knew him. When they walked far enough and were concealed from the eyes of the cohort by several tall walls, Changing Star stopped and turned to face him. Looking at Sunny, she said, It is good that we can speak privately. Actually, I wanted to ask you a favor. He blinked. Well, that is unexpected. What is it? She hesitated for a few moments. After my fight with Gunlog is over, if, when I win, I might not be in the best shape. Even if I am, there will be flood of soul essence pouring into my body. It will incapacitate me for habit. The changes that happened to the body after a small portion of soul essence was consumed were subtle, but in large quantities, it could be disorienting, sometimes even debilitating for a short while. Sometimes, experiencing these changes and getting used to them took a little time. Sunny tilted his head. A flood of soul essence. What does it matter if her core is either full to the brim or at least almost saturated? He frowned, trying to guess what she wanted from him. So what do you need Metadough? Keep Harus busy while you recover. She shook her head, then looked away. A light sigh escaped from Changing Star's lips. No, I want you to make sure that Castor is now here near me when that happens. Here it was. The truth was about to come out. Sunny stared at Nephis, his expression cold and dark. After a few moments off in silence, he hissed. Why, what is the deal with you and Castor? She looked at them, her striking grey eyes calm and deep. Then, she said, it's very simple, really. Castor has been sent here to kill me. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 285 to 285. Kill Order. 1092 words. Sunny remained silent for a few moments. Finally, it became clear that Neffys wasn't going to continue. Feeling a slight sense of exasperation, he hissed. Why would Castor want to kill you? Despite the calm appearance, there was a tempest raging in his mind. The revelation of Castor's true intention had shaken Sunny. Yes, Hedis liked the proud legacy, and yes, their dynamic with Changing Star had always been a bit strange, but he never expected to hear something like this. In his mind, Castor was more of an opportunist with distasteful ambitions, most likely having Toto with the purity of his clan's bloodline than a cold-blooded killer. In what world did him wishing to kill Neffys make any sense? He was her #1 fan. The only logical explanation Sunny could find was that the proud scion had been secretly working for Gunlog all along. But then, that theory also didn't hold when subjected to a close inspection. The Bright Lord was determined to kill Changing Star with his own 2 hands and in front of hundreds of people. What would he need Castor for? Neffys lingered for habit, then shrugged. People have been trying to kill me for as long as I can remember. Have you forgotten? Sunny slowly shook his head. No, ID not. But what does that have Toto with Castor? She smiled. They were not going to stop just because I came Ophage, survived my first nightmare, and was sent into the dream realm. If anything, that would have been the perfect opportunity to finally make me disappear forever. Sleepers enter this cursed world alone, away from the protections of society and whatever allies they might have in the real one. Do you see? He gave her anid, his expression growing dark. Indeed, no one was as vulnerable as young sleepers entering the dream realm for the first time. Neffy sighed and looked away. In any case, when Jan rolled into the academy, I knew that someone among our classmates had to have received orders to make sure that it never returned from the dream realm. I just didn't know who it was. Suddenly, she glanced at them. The corner of her lips curled upward. Quote dot dot dot. Actually, for a long time, it thought that it was you. Sunny blinked and stared at her in disbelief. What, me? Are you crossing? Actually, never mind. What exactly about me made you think that I'm an agent of some secret legacy cabal? Do I look like a legacy to you? Neffys calmly looked him in the eye. Honestly, not any legacy that I know. But there were too many things about you that didn't make sense. He frowned. Dotel. She slowly raised her hand, then began counting on her fingers. Let's see, you claimed to be an orphan from the outskirts, but somehow managed to survive both the first nightmare and the arrival on the Forgotten Shore. You didn't consume any soul shards, but kept growing more powerful. You said that you had never held a sword in your hand, but absorbed my lessons with astonishing speed. And finally, every other word you said was ally, especially when it came to your origins, your past, your strength, and your aspect. Running out Offenger's own hand, she made a fist and pointed to it. Need I continue? Sunny cleared his throat. No, well, when you put it like this. She smiled and shook her hand, then lowered it. But after some time, I realized that my suspicions about you were wrong. If you were really tasked with killing me, you could have just left me on the Ashen Barrow. Back then, I was as good as dead. But you didn't. In fact, you risked a lot to take both Cassie and me with you. The smile slowly disappeared from her face. Sofinware reached the bright castle and Castor immediately appeared, insinuating his way into my inner circle. I knew pretty much instantly that it was him. Sunny frowned. Aren't you getting ahead of yourself? Don't get me wrong, I'm the last person in this world who would want to defend that pompous bastard, but there were hundreds of sleepers in Norcroft, and out of those, only 7 were sent to the Forgotten Shore. And only 4 lived long enough to see the castle. What are the chances that the person with orders to make you vanish was among them? Isn't it a bit too big of a coincidence? Changing Star slowly shook her head. Who said it was a coincidence? People often tend to forget that the spell has a mind of its own. It sees all and hears all. And it really loves to play with fate. If there was someone among those hundreds of people tasked with killing me, the chances of me having a fateful encounter with them in the dream realm would be all but guaranteed. That I show the spell always does things. Sunny had to agree. The spell, indeed, loved to play with fate. His whole damn life was proof of that. Meanwhile, Neffys continued. Of course, despite my suspicions, I wasn't sure at first. But the more I observed Castor, the more convinced I became that I was right. Headed everything in his power to get close to home, and then tried his hardest to subtly isolate me from everyone I could have trusted. Has spent his time studying my every move, while keeping his secrets close to his chest. Idisham, I've been sure of it for a long time. Sunny tilted his head, trying to digest this new information. After a while, he asked, if Castor wanted to kill you, why hasn't he made a move to kill you yet? She lingered for habit, then smiled slightly. Because among all of the humans on the Forgotten Shore, he knows what the scions of the Immortal Flame clan are capable of the best. Isn't it ironic? He respects my ability too much to be careless, maybe even fears it. And Hekantalo himself to fail. His honor won't follow it. So, Castor won't attack until he's absolutely sure that I won't be able to resist. He'll make his move when I have no chance to escape. Sunny scratched the back of his head. Let me rephrase that. If Castor wants to kill you, why is still alive? Why didn't you kill him already? He was sure that if Neffys wanted to, the proud legacy would have been dead a long time ago. Changing Star hesitated, and then said in an even tone. Because I need him for what I Stockholm. It doesn't matter that he intends to betray me. Traitor or not, hi Sofuse, share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 286 to 286, Blessings of the Fire. 1051 words. Sometime later, the 6 of them left the secluded ruin and made their way toward the bright castle. The dark city was silent and bleak, its streets devoid of life and movement. Even the nightmare creatures seemed to remain hidden in the lairs today, asked how feeling the tension that hung in the air like a harbinger of a disastrous change. A lonely star was about to ignite in the sky above the cursed city. Neffys was the first one to walk under the marble arch and step on the road that led to the outer settlement. Her face was calm and motionless, any hint of emotion hidden behind her usual mask of indifference. It was asked how she was returning home in triumph, not marching to her own execution. There was a slightly distant look in her eyes. Sunny abandoned his usual position at the back of the group and was now walking side by side with her. Maybe it was just a whim, but he felt unwilling to follow in her footsteps as she had always done before, from the first day they met. As he ascended the tall hill, Changing Star suddenly asked, Sunny, do you remember your first nightmare well? Her voice sounded relaxed and idle. Hecate sideways glanced at her and hesitated for a few moments. Then, he answered in an even tone. Like it was yesterday. She smiled slightly. Was it hard? Slowly, a grin appeared on his face. Hard? No, not hard. Impossible. It was ghastly, despicable, and tortuous ordeal. Truly the stuff of nightmares. Calling it hard would be an injustice. With a dismissive shrug, Sunny drove the memories of the Black Mountain away and asked. Quote. What about yours? Neffys looked away, remembering. After a while, she said. Mine wasn't that bad, actually. Hess stared at her in disbelief. What, you only had to kill a measly 1,000 unholy titans with your bare hands, or something like that? Knowing you, not that bad, means that it was nothing short of a true horror show. She slowly shook her head. Quote. No, I mean it didn't have to fight anyone, really. Up until the very end. Sunny blinked. Wait, seriously? A strangely sad smile appeared on her lips. In me first nightmare, I was the daughter of a lighthouse keeper. My family lived in a beautiful tower on the shore of a beautiful sea. Every morning, the warm sun rose from beyond the horizon, bathing the endless expanse of azure waves in beautiful light. The winds were gentle and the world was kind. It was me, my parents, and my younger siblings. Well lived together in harmony, humbly but needing for nothing. Hef frowned. And then what? A serpent destroyed the lighthouse. Some rotten horror rose from the depths. Changing Star Shays became distant. A few moments passed before she spoke again. No, nothing happened. That was the point of it, I think. My nightmare. It was actually a paradise. It was everything I dreamed about when I was a little kid. Only much more wondrous and human than I could have ever imagined. Sunny looked at her in utter shock. Asha watched. The hint of sorrow disappeared from Neff's face, replaced by a subtly harsh expression. But that was what made it so hard to overcome. Impossible, even, just like you said, because all I had to conquer the nightmare. All I had to do was to walk away and leave Edel behind. Knowing that I could just stay there, in that paradise. Forever. He hesitated for a while, then asked cautiously. So what did you do? A heavy sigh escaped from Neff's lips. Her eyes grew dim. Quote. I searched for a way out of the nightmare for a long time. But no matter how hard I looked, there wasn't any. Day after day, night after night, as time went by, it became harder and harder to force myself to continue searching. I grew accustomed to that bliss, that warm and beautiful life. And eventually, a day came when I thought that, maybe, it should stop. Maybe I can just stay. She tilted her head slightly and said, her tantalizing voice reaching the deepest, darkest parts of his heart. Quote. That was the day I went to the top of the lighthouse. You see, Sunny, you have to light yourself on fire. To reap the blessings of the fire. That was what my grandmother used to say. So that was what I did. I doused myself in oil, and set myself aflame. The white flame suddenly licked her hands, and she stared at them, her face slowly turning pale, her eyes reflecting the terrible agony she felt. Asher Ivory's skin continuously boiled, darkened, and then healed to become pristine again, she said simply. Quote. And I burned. Suddenly, the flames disappeared, and she made a fist. Her voice grew a little strained. And after a long, long time, when all of it was over, I found myself in a dark cave, nestled in a slimy cocoon of black silk. All around me, thousands upon thousands of people were sleeping in similar cocoons with their eyes open, with happy smiles on their empty faces. And above us, was a creature so revolting and abhorrent that I can bring myself to describe it to this day. It was feeding on her dreams. She grew quiet for habit, and then added, that creature was convulsing in pain, asked how it shared in the agony I felt, too. Somehow, I managed to break free of the cocoon, and kill it before it fully regained its senses. She glanced at them and smiled. However, there was no warmth in that smile. Quote. That was how I conquered my first nightmare. Sunny looked her in the eyes for a long time, silent. Then, has slowly turned away. Quote. Just as I said, the stuff of nightmares. I guess we call them that for a reason. Changing Star laughed. I guess. But really, fighting the terror wasn't the hardest part. Waking up trapped in a repulsive cocoon wasn't the hardest part. Even burning alive wasn't the hardest part. She grew silent for a few moments and then said, looking at the white road beneath their feet. The hardest part was walking up the steps to the top of the lighthouse. Not because of what waited for my future, but because of what I was leaving in the past. Soon, the familiar shapes of the outer settlement appeared in their sight. They had finally returned to the bright castle. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 287 to 287, Lonely Star. 1043 words. The outer settlement had changed from the time Sunny saw it last. At the point where the white road widened into the vast platform that the settlement stood upon, a tall stone barricade was built, with watchful sentries observing the approach to the crest of the hill. Each of them was wielding a memory weapon and sturdy armor, their faces full of dark determination. The makeshift watchtower constructed on the roof of Nef's lodge loomed above them, with several archers ready to rain arrows on any nightmare creature that wandered close. The slum itself was much the same, but the people populating it seemed different. Many of them were bruised and bandaged, but their eyes shone with a subtle light of hope that wasn't there or strong before. That hope was contrasted against the suffocating feeling of tension that hung in the air. From time to time, someone would glance toward the castle and frown, a dark expression appearing on their face. There was another detail that surprised Sunny. On the sleeves of many slum dwellers, a piece of pure white cloth was tied, a sieve announcing their allegiance to some god or goddess. There had been none of that when he left this place a few months ago. There were also graffiti drawn on the walls of the most derelict hovels, some of them depicting a shining star, some the image of a beautiful bronze spear. Single quote. What is that all about? The white armbands and the star were, obviously, meant to represent Neffy's. But when had Effie suddenly become an apostle? Glancing at the voracious huntress, her raised an eyebrow. Anything you want to tell me? She scratched the back of her head, then shrugged. I've become abbot of a folk hero, apparently. Sunny shook his head and didn't press the issue. Whatever. When the sentries saw who was approaching, their faces first became shocked, and then lighted up with intense jubilation. Lady Neffy's. It's Changing Star. Lady Neffy's has returned. She is alive. The hum of voices spread through the entire settlement in an instant. If Gunlog had not known that they were back in the Dark City, he would have learned of it now. But Heck knew, of course. Heck knew it long before the people of the slum ever laid their eyes on their supposed savior. Sunny looked past the outer settlement, at the mighty walls of the bright castle. How long before its lord throws them a welcome party? Soon, the cohort was surrounded by a crowd of exhilarated people. Everyone wanted to see that St. Neffy's was alive and well with their own eyes. The other members were bathing in attention, too. Especially Effie. Effie, Huntress Athena, welcome home, Effie, show them. The Huntress grinned in bewilderment and kept quiet. In the crowd, there were a few faces that did not share in everyone's joy. They were the leaders of the outer settlement shunting parties. The gazes they threw at Nephis were grim and full of meaning. She gave them Anid, letting the experienced hunters know that she understood the message they were trying to relay. Then, Changing Star faced the inhabitants of the slum and took the bag that Effie handed her. Slowly unclasping it, she spoke, her calm voice effortlessly making the crowd grow silent. I am not good with words, so, please accept my gratitude, dreamers of the Dark City. The past few months have been harsh on me and the members of my cohort, but they must have been equally as harsh on you. However, we have persevered, you here in this cursed ruins, and we out there in the ghastly depths of the labyrinth. But all of it was not in vain. With that, she took something from the bag and tossed it to the ground. Suddenly, a deathly silence settled over the crowd. Everyone was staring at the object laying on the stones, expressions of fear clearly written on many faces. It was a terrifying, jagged black talon, which was as sharp and long as a sword. And then, another one fell near it, and another, and another. Eventually, 38 of these dark blades lay in ample in front of Neffy's, 30 from the 6 front limbs of the spire messenger, and 8 from the 2 hind ones. Closing the bag, Neffy's put it in her shoulder and said, her tone dark and piercing. Out there in the labyrinth, we have fought and slew one of the cursed messengers of the Crimson Spire. I bring you its claws as a gift, to become your weapons. Stunned whispers ran through the crowd. The messengers were both a symbol of terror and a symbol of hope to the people of the Dark City, terror because of their horrifying power and appetite, as well as their connection to the dreaded spire, and hope because of the legends that once, a long time ago, a group of powerful sleepers had managed to kill one. And now, the legend came alive right in front of their eyes. Neffy's lingered for a moment, and then sighed, a somber note appearing in her voice. Many years ago, we, those who were sent to the Forgotten Shore, weren't yet imprisoned by fear. Enthralled by the sin of those cowards who had forgotten that they are, first and forever, humans. Back then, there were people among us willing to risk their lives to conquer this hell. Escape it. The First Lord and his companions were the greatest of them. And now, brilliant sparks of light suddenly appeared around her head like a sacred halo. Changing star shayas shined with pure white radiance, and, as crown of dawn weaved itself from light and fell upon her head, she spoke. She didn't try or even strain her voice, but the impact of her words only grew because of it. Quote. I have brought his legacy back to the Dark City. This ice the crown of the First Lord. We have retrieved it from a place of eternal darkness where he had fallen in battle. Hetty trying to find a way out of this cursed land for all of us to follow. She paused for a moment and then said, her face illuminated by the brilliant white flames that burned in her furious eyes. On her forehead, the single gem decorating the dawn shard shone with that brilliance, too. Almost like a third eye. And with it, we will finish what has started. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 288 to 288. Progress Report. 1,156 words. Sometime later, they entered the Stone Lodge and found themselves in the middle of another, smaller crowd. Around 30 or 40 people gathered in the main hall of Changing Star's dwelling, making it look even smaller than it had before. However, these were not just any sleepers from the slum. Most of them were experienced fighters from the outer settlements hunting parties, as well as people who Neffys had recruited into her faction during her time in the Dark City. Back when Sunny had been a part of the group, they were weak and hopeless young men and women who were barely surviving in the cruel reality of the Forgotten Shore. Now, things changed. Neff's little helpers were armed with makeshift weapons and wearing armors fashioned from a wide variety of scavenged materials, while some were even in possession of memories. They also held themselves very differently from before. Honestly, the difference between them and the hunters was not that big now. If Sunny didn't know which were which, he might have mistaken one for the other. Changing Star walked through the crowd and approached the window that opened on the bleak view of the cursed ruins. She looked at it for a short moment, and then turned around, a dark expression on her face. Quote. Tell me. The leaders of the hunting parties glanced at each other. One of them, a stocky young man with long messy hair and 3 ugly scars running all the way from his forehead to his chin, spoke with a bit of uncertainty. Welcome back, Lady Neffys. It is good that you are alive and well. She gave him an. The hunter paused, then continued, his voice somber. We, have followed your orders and advice for these past months. The militia you created has been reinforced and organized to protect the settlement from the attacking monsters. With the memories you and your cohort hunted for using the ruins, the casualties were low both among the watchmen and among the civilians. Compared to before, Changing Star remained silent and just stared at them. The young man sighed. About the other thing, it went almost exactly how you told us it would. Members of the host came into the settlement shortly after your departure, demanding that Effie surrendered herself to be judged for the disappearance of those guards. When we told them that she was gone, they got violent. Several people were injured, but no one died. Effie scoffed. The hunter gave her a complicated look and scratched his cheek. After that, they would come again every week or so, hurt a few people and break things, always with the same demand. But we kept our cool and just, well, took it, like you told Eustodo. That seemed to only make them angrier, but they had no real reason to escalate things. In the end, they just settled for making our lives difficult and pushing people around. The tall huntress shook her head. What is with the people foaming at their mouths to greet me? What is that really about? The young man looked down in embarrassment and cleared his throat. Well, you see, the more the castle proclaimed that you have Tonser for the murder of those guards, the more people in the settlement became, how do I say this, appreciative of you. Effie looked at them with a perplexed expression. Because I am being unjustly accused. Hesmold sheepishly. No. Actually, the opposite. They really appreciate the fact that you had, allegedly, killed half a dozen guards. In fact, their only regret is that you didn't kill more. There are tales about how exactly you dealt with them, too, one more colorful than the other. The most popular one is that, the guards wanted to rob you of your, honor, so that's you had to teach the castle folks a lesson. The tall huntress blinked. My, honor? Since when do I have honor? The young man grinned. Hey, did look at me. ID not come up with this one, alright. Blame Park, it was his idea. Effie looked darkly at another hunter, who just shrugged. Lady Neffys told Eustodo or best to make people in the settlement root for you. It worked, did it not? The unruly huntress rubbed her face with an exasperated expression. But, it didn't kill them, though. The hunter looked at her with no humor in his eyes. Who cares? Effie opened her mouth to say something, but Neffys interrupted her. Time is short, didn't was it on useless chatter. Then, she turned to the hunter with scars on his face and asked. What about my last instruction? He frowned, then took out a small wooden box from a leather pouch tied to his belt. The young man held the little box like it was the most terrible nightmare creature. Handling it with extreme caution, he approached Neffys and handed it to her. There were drops of sweat on his forehead. This is what the person from the castle brought. I didn't know what they used to make Keto create that thing, but the result was exactly as you wished, at least according to the note they left. He hesitated. The box and the note simply appeared on my pillow one day. I almost died of a heart attack when I read what that thing is supposed to be. Sunny stared at the box with interest. Keto was one of Gunlogus lieutenants, a young woman in charge of the artisans. Her aspect ability allowed her to manipulate certain qualities of plants, which was of tremendous use here on the Forgotten Shore, where the food was scarce and monotonous. But what could Neffys want from her that was so important? And why was the hunter so scared of the little box? Carefully taking it, Changing Star looked at the box for a few moments, and then handed it to Castor. You know what, Toto? With a short nod, Castor walked toward the door and disappeared. Neffys, meanwhile, turned to the hunters and said in a steady tone. You did well, thank you, all. A wide smiles appeared on their faces. She took Effie's bottomless bag and opened it once again. Turning the bag upside down, Changing Star said, This is, not a reward, nor a seed a gift. This is just something that all of you deserve, and are going to need very soon. A moment later, a river of glimmering crystals flowed from the bag, scattering on the table's surface. There were hundreds and hundreds of them, each shining with subtle, alluring light. Soon, the crystal spilled over the edges of the table and fell to the floor. A few moments later, more than Athusan soul shards appeared before the stunned people who were gathered in the room. The bottomless bag finally ran empty. Sunny stared at the tall pile of shining crystals inside. Back before all of this had started, he had apple like that of his own. Only much, much smaller. His pride and joy, it was all gone now, sadly. What a sight, and it thought I was rich. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 289 to 289. Start of the play. 1158 words. Back in the labyrinth, Sunny was not the only one who had killed countless nightmare creatures. In fact, due to his primary role as a scout, the three main fighters of the cohort had killed many more. Heck knew for a fact that at least two of them, Effie and Castor, had fully saturated their soul cores long before their return journey was finished. Absorbing any more shards would have been useless for them. At some point, Neffis had begun to abstain from consuming her share of the spoils, too. Added with the shards that Sunny traded for the unwanted memories that the members of the cohort had accumulated, a truly incredible amount of the alluring crystals had been placed into Effie's leather bag. He had often wondered what Neffis would use them for, and now, he had his answer. The people gathered in the main hall of the hunting lodge, her most trusted subordinates, stared at the tall pile of soul shards in utter shock. Here in the Dark City, this was an inconceivable wealth. One shard was enough to buy a person a week of food, comfort, and safety behind the tall walls of the bright castle. Too many had died because they lacked these things. So, in essence, the mountain of crystals in front of them was tantamount to 1,000 human lives. The scarred hunter slowly tore his eyes away from the glittering shards and looked at Changing Star, his face pale and his voice suddenly raspy. What ice this, Lady Neffis? She remained silent for a few moments, and then said in her even, reserved, strangely affecting voice. This is for you. Nourish yourselves, and grow stronger. You are going to need every bit of strength for what awaits you in the days to come. The young man watched her, a dangerous flame slowly igniting in his eyes. A flame of resolve, adoration, almost worship, hidden in a shadowy corner. Sunny smiled with dark apprehension. Back at the start of it all, he had told Neffis that Gunlog could not be defeated because he controlled every facet of life here in the Dark City, food, safety, hope and fear. Even power itself. Then, he had watched as he gave the people of the outer settlement free food, placed them under the protection of her sword, and ignited the embers of the long-forgotten hope in their hearts. All that remained was power. And now, she had brought them power as well. No wonder they were ready to worship her. In their eyes, Changing Star was a noble savior. No one knew that their messiah was a counterfeit one. Glancing at the stunned people, Effie sighed and took her bag from Nefshan's. Looking inside the empty memory with avid facade expression, she said. What are you waiting for? Gunlogus men are probably already arming themselves to come here and break your thick skulls. Share the shards among yourselves and absorb them, dimwits. The sleepers did not make her say it twice. Not long after the last shard had been absorbed, one of the watchers ran into the room, breathing heavily. Coming, they are coming. There was a hint of unrestrained fear in her voice. Sunny flexed his shoulders and stretched. The show is about to start. The people gathered in the room glanced at each other, their faces full of attention. Only Neffis remained indifferent, watching out of the window at the dead city that sprawled below her like a desolate, lonesome graveyard. Stay calm, everyone. Her voice settled them down. The hunter with scars on his face turned to Changing Star, a deep frown on his face. After hesitating for a few moments, he said, But, they are coming to take Effie. We can allow that to happen. I'm done watching good people be taken into the damn castle and never return. If they want to make an example out of her, like they did with Jubei, over my dead body. The hum of angry voices rose in the hall, accompanied by heated glares. Exactly, they will pay for Jubei's death. Your dead body, why not their dead bodies? Neffis lingered for a moment, then turned to them. A slight smile appeared on her face. Quote. Don't worry, nothing is going to happen to Effie. You have my word. That seemed to calm them down a little. It seemed asked how they were willing to believe anything she said, regardless of how impossible her promises were. Was that the definition of blind faith? Before anyone could answer, however, a crashing sound came from the direction of the entrance to the stone lodge. It seemed asked how someone had just smashed through the door. There was a short scream, which quickly grew silent. Something fell on the floor. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps could be heard, drawing closer to the hall where all the people had gathered. A few moments later, its door was shattered, too, exploding into a shower of splinters along with the bits of stone that surrounded it. Agent O'Famine walked into the hall, his mere presence making the entire space look tiny. Compared to him, even Effie seemed to be of average height. There was a morose expression on his face and a dark glint in his cold, cruel eyes. The giant did not wear any armor, allowing his monumental muscles to strain the fabric of a sleeveless silk shirt. I dappered that Tessai, the fearsome leader of the castle guard, had decided to welcome the cohort back to the Dark City himself. Neff's followers paled, their fiery indignation replaced by fear. What a monster, Sunny thought indifferently, pondering on what the quickest way to kill the morose giant would be. Behind Tessai, a group of guards, each wearing astardy armor and wielding memory weapons, could be seen. Their eyes were immediately drawn to the robust figure of the tall huntress, and then, hateful smiles appeared on their faces. The guards seemed very happy to finally find the woman accused of murdering their own. The giant only glanced at Effie and then turned to Neffis. His deep, low voice resounded in the stone hall, sending shivers running through the hearts of many sleepers gathered there. Changing Star, so you're alive after all. She met his gaze and endured it without flinching. You must be Tessai. To what do I owe the pleasure? The giant lingered before answering. The corner of his mouth twitched and slowly curled upward. Finally, he said, Oh, no, the pleasure is all mine. Then, he raised his mighty arm and pointed at Effie. Lord Gunlog has invited this one to the castle, to face punishment for her crimes. You should have trained your dogs better, Changing Star. See what happens when they go around biting people. He lowered his hand and flexed his shoulders, then looked at her with a dark expression. Now, I would advise you rats to step aside and let me take that she-wolf with me. Neffys crossed her arms and stared at the giant, cold sparks igniting in the depths of her calm gray eyes. A few moments later, she said evenly, quote. Or what, share to your friends. Enjoying this site, support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 290 to 290, Judgment Day. 996 words. Changing Star's words brought the room to dead silence. On both sides of it, people were slowly preparing themselves, dark resentment burning in their eyes. It felt as how the tension reached critical mass and was about to explode into a storm of violence. Only 3 people remained calm and unaffected by the dureness of the situation, Neffys herself, Sunny, and Tessai. The giant bared his canines in a grin. His eyes, however, remained cold asses. What a revelation. And here I was, thinking that you were a great defender of justice. Were you not, Changing Star? Or is your sense of justice reserved only for the crimes of those who didn't serve you? He sighed and added, his voice full of disappointment. That huntress of yours is accused of murder. Why are you trying to prevent me from bringing her to justice? It thought that you, Ophal people, would not get in the way of fairness. Neffys frowned. Accused does not mean convicted. Why do you claim that she is guilty? Tessai stared at her and said, his low voice sending tremors through the stone hall. There is plenty of evidence. There are plenty of witnesses. So many people came forward to give testimony. Her guilt is undeniable. How will you answer that, Changing Star? Sunny smiled slightly. How peculiar. So many people apparently saw Effie slaughter those fools. Did imagine killing them or what? I was a bit crazy at the time, to be fair. Ha. Before Neffys could answer, Kai suddenly took a step forward and shouted. That is impossible. However, she made him stop with a stern look. The charming young man hesitated, then gritted his teeth and fell silent, glaring at Tessai with burning indignation. Changing Star turned to the imposing giant and smiled. Quote. Well, that changes everything, then. Please forgive me, if you can. I have been away from the Dark City for so long, and wasn't informed of these developments. If this is the case, then by all means, take her away. Effie grimaced and looked at her with an amused expression. Sunny did not take his eyes off of Tessai, however, his shadow stared at Neffys too. The smile suddenly disappeared from her face, replaced by boundless coldness. Quote. However, I am coming with her. All Ofusair, in fact, we're awfully curious to see that evidence and hear those witnesses. And, most Ophal, we're all dying to see justice done and those guilty punished. Surely, Lord Gunlog would not mind. An expression of dissatisfaction appeared on Tessai's face. With a deep frown, he looked down on Neff from his oppressive height and said in a growling voice. Why do you think that you can come, wench? Changing Star was silent for a few moments, calmly looking at them. Then, her eyes suddenly shone with furious white light. In a voice that promised agony and death, she said with contempt. Quote. Who's going to stop me? The giant stared at her with a complicated expression. It seemed as how he was being torn between pride and fear. It was all a mask, though. A masterful performance to hide his true emotions. Triumph and jubilation. He had come here with the excuse of bringing Effie to justice, but his true goal had always been Neffy's. She was the one Gunlog wanted to destroy. And now, she was bringing herself to him, like a lamb going to slaughter. What Tessai did not know was that Changing Star was as far from a lamb as own could be. Single quote. More like a demon in sheep's clothing. Sunny glanced at the morose giant with something that resembled pity. Meanwhile, Tessai slowly shook his head and said, his voice full of false reluctance. Quote. Fine, dose you wish. Come with me to the castle, if you want. Bring your rats with you. All of you will witness the brilliance of Lord. All together, they exited the lodge. Tessai was walking in the front, holding the tall huntress by the shoulder. Her hands were tied behind her back with a flimsy rope, more of a symbolic gesture than aerial restraint, considering Effie's strength. Neffys was keeping close, her face calm and indifferent. The guards and the members of Changing Star's faction were right behind them, throwing menacing looks at each other. Their faces were grim and full of resentful indignation. Sunny had hidden himself in the crowd, not wishing to draw any attention. Now, he was moving with it, feeling the restless agitation through the chaotic movement of the surrounding shadows. As he moved toward the castle, more and more slum dwellers surrounded them, their faces full of shock and anger. They got Effie, bastards, let her go, Lady Neffys, do something. Glancing at the growing number of people who were gathering around them, she smiled reassuringly and said. Stay calm, come with USIFYO you want. Today, we'll see justice done. However, her appeal to remain calm had the opposite effect on the crowd. It ignited it instead, and soon, a clamor of shouts rose above the outer settlement. Justice, justice. However, at some point, the tone of it changed, an almost palpable sense of bloodlust finding its way into the people's voices. The word they were shouting was also replaced, and soon, the crowd was chanting something else. Calling not for justice, but for judgment, judgment, judgment. Sunny observed the raging beast of the human crowd with a troubled frown. A cold, familiar emotion grasped his heart. Heck knew this sickening feeling all too well. It was the same way he felt when facing frenzied nightmare creatures. Hell, as he drew close to the stairs leading to the entrance of the castle, almost 100 people were following them. The guards standing at the gate stared at the crowd with avid fear in their eyes. And at some point, Castor appeared out of nowhere and took position right behind Neffys. The proud legacy looked pale and avid disheveled, but it seemed that he had managed to complete the mysterious task given to him by Changing Star without receiving any wounds. A few moments later, they entered the bright castle. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 291 to 291, Eye of the Storm. 1095 words. The crowd poured into the castle, their faces contorted with anger and resentment. However, as soon as slum dwellers passed beneath the swaying skulls that hung above the gates, their fury turned cold. In the echoing stone halls of the bright castle, it was hard to forget that Gunlog's power was absolute. For as long as any of them remembered, he had ruled over the Dark City with honor and fist, elevating those who bowed to him and destroying those who did not. Countless men and women had tried to challenge the Bright Lord in the past, great people, terrible people, and everyone in between. It was their skulls that now stared at the crowd, darkness nesting in their eyes. Finally, doubt and fear appeared in the hearts of the inhabitants of the outer settlement. Many of them stared at Nephis, their faces turning dim and listless. Changing Star did not react to the sudden change in one way or another. Looking straight ahead, she calmly walked forward, an indifferent expression on her face. Her usual mask was in its place once again, preventing anyone from knowing her true thoughts. Trying to remain unnoticed, Sunny made his way to the front of the crowd, Toby closer to Nephis, Effie, and Castor. No one paid him any attention. In the grand scheme of things, people thought of him as an insignificant piece, if at all. Just like Hugh did them too. From his point of view, the atmosphere in the bright castle seemed to a bit strange, and not because of the invading horde of slum dwellers. Its halls and corridors were too empty, too lifeless. He didn't see any people hurrying on their daily business, as he always would. Even the opulent desk in the entrance hall was empty, the clerk usually present behind Edip sent for some reason. Where is everyone? His question was soon answered. Entering the throne room, he saw hundreds of sleepers standing along its walls, waiting to meet them. It seemed asked how the whole population of the bright castle had gathered here. There were the guards, the hunters, the artisans, the quiet handmaidens. Even people who paid tribute to Tormain in the castle were all there. Sunny noticed a few familiar faces. Stev, the large man in charge of the memory market, stood uncomfortably near the members of the host. There was also Iko, the owner of the gambling den, and many others whom he remembered from his brief stay in the castle. The air was tense and heavy. It seemed that not all of these people had come to the throne room of their own free will. Many of them had troubled, frightened expressions on their faces. Others were relaxed and joyful, waiting for an entertaining show with dark fascination burning in their eyes. What disturbed him the most were the several figures of nightmare creatures standing among the humans. Those were the echoes belonging to the inhabitants of the castle, each one more terrifying than the other. Single quote. Why are they out of their owner's soul seas? One the raised dais at the far end of the great hall, illuminated by the false stars that were carved into the wall of the dark alcove, the 4 lieutenants of the Bright Lord stood. There was Gemma, the leader of the hunters, Keto, the chief artisan, and Sishan, who was in charge of the handmaidens. And Haruz, of course. Sunny stared at the dreadful hunchback, who just stood there with his usual bored expression, looking at the wall. He was pretty sure that today, at least one of them was going toady. As if feeling his gaze, Haruz suddenly turned and glanced at Sunny. This time, however, Sunny did not look away. He stared straight into the hunchback's glassy eyes, a calm and calculating expression on his face. I wonder how he killed all those people without being seen even once. With so many victims, somebody had to catch a glimpse of this butcher hard at work. What aspect ability does he possess? How do I counter it? Haruz stared at them for a few moments, then tilted his head and smiled with strange amusement. A second later, he turned away and looked at the wall again, seemingly losing all interest. Meanwhile, Tessai walked to the middle of the hall and threw Effie down, forcing her to kneel on the floor. Then, he gave Nephis a dark look and joined the other lieutenants on the steps leading to the throne. The 200 Orsislum dwellers were standing at one end of the throne room, their faces grim and full of dark apprehension. With the exception of those directly serving Changing Star, most of them were dressed in dirty rags, with only a few wearing a proper armor. Some were unarmed, some had memories or makeshift weapons hanging on their belts, and some even had swords hastily fashioned out of the talons of the slain spire messenger. Opposite them, with their back to the throne, stood the people of the castle. Many of them looked like they didn't want to be here, but more had contempt and indignation in their eyes. Those were mostly the members of the host, who were more than 200 people strong. Each of them was clad in sturdy memory armor and wielded enchanted weapons. They were strong, well-fed, and experienced in combat. The hunters, especially, were a formidable presence despite their comparatively small number. They were looking at Nephis with intense hatred, the memory of her killing one of their own in this very hall still fresh in their minds. Changing Star stood beside Effie in the middle of the empty space between the two groups, looking at the white throne. Her ivory face was cold and indifferent, and her silver hair glinted in the rays of sunshine that fell through tall windows. Sparks of light were dancing in the depths of her calm gray eyes. She was the focal point of everyone's attention and the target of the dark storm of emotions that raged between the ancient walls of the castle today. If it bothered her, she did not show it. And then, finally, the Bright Lord himself appeared. Sunny knew that Gunlog entered the great hall even before seeing him. Heck knew it because of the sudden change in the people that surrounded him. It was asked how a wave of invisible pressure had crashed into the crowd, forcing them to groan and bend, almost buckling to the ground. Their legs trembled, their faces paled, and drops of sweat appeared on their skin, as well as fear and panic in their eyes. The mastermind behind this ghoulish spectacle had finally arrived. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 292 to 292, Just Cause. 974 words. Gunlog looked just like the last time Sunny had seen him, like a golden demon born of some harrowing hell. The Bright Lord was tall and had broad, powerful shoulders. His body was clad in strange armor that seemed to be made out of molten gold. It was both solid and liquid, flowing over his mighty muscles and covering him from head to toe. Not even Gunlog's shades were exposed. In the place where his face should have been, there was nothing but a smooth and empty expanse of polished gold. The great hall of the bright castle reflected in it, and all the people gathered there did, too. As soon as Sunny saw the golden mask, he felt the oppressive aura that radiated from the Bright Lord. Even knowing what was going to happen, he couldn't help but shake a little and bite his lip. The mind assault of the golden armor was truly hard to ender. Even with the protection of the puppeteer's shroud, he felt it pressing on him, making a hard toe breath. Deep inside, a primal, bestial fear was clawing at his heart. But this fear did not belong to him. It was fake. With a dark grimace, Sunny strangled it and made it disappear. Walking out of the darkness of the alcove like a golden apparition, Gunlog glanced at the mass of people below him and sat on the throne. His pose was relaxed and casual, asked how he was here to leisurely resolve a trivial matter, not decide someone's fate. Hundreds of fates, perhaps. However, despite his laid-back attitude, everyone gathered in the great hall swayed a little, pressed down to the ground by the incredible force of his presence. The Bright Lord lingered for a few moments, and then said, his serpentine voice full of mirth. Ah, what a sight. All my precious wards gathered here, united in the desire to see justice prevail. This dedication, this fervor for the rule of law, oh, it just makes my blood boil with appreciation. Didn't you think it's wonderful? Hel often turned his head slightly, peering directly at Nephis. She lowered her head a bit, an almost imperceptible tremor running through her body. To Sunny, though, it seemed asked how the plates of marble beneath her feet were about to crack from the terrifying pressure Gunlog's gaze. Nevertheless, she endured it without showing much of the tremendous strain she was under. The Bright Lord paused and then echoed his words, a note of some dark emotion finding its way into his voice. Didn't you think it's wonderful, changing star of the immortal flame clan? Nephis gritted her teeth, struggling to remain steady under the psychic onslaught of the golden armor. When she finally answered, her voice sounded suppressed. Quote. Indeed, Gunlog remained silent for a bit. Although his face was hidden behind the golden mask, Sunny had a feeling that he was smiling. Finally, He spoke. How nice. Somehow, I was under the impression that you would disagree. I've been told by my most loyal aides that you are a disagreeable person. I guess you just can trust anyone these days. With that, He glanced at his lieutenants, making them pale and shiver. Sunny shivered, too. The message hidden in those words was clear. Gunlog was letting Nephis know that he had known that she had asked be among the highest ranks of his people all along. And didn't care, maybe even silently allowed it to happen. Damnation, how much did he know? Finally, the Bright Lord looked at Effie. After a few seconds had passed intense silence, He spoke to her with a hint of sadness. We meet again, Effie, what a shame that it is in these tragic circumstances. If only you had listened to me and joined the host, perhaps then you might not have fallen so low. Such pity. He shook his head and sighed. I had high hopes for you. But, alas, murdering innocent humans is not something that can be forgiven. Look at yourself. Instead, O noble hunter, you have turned into a wild beast. But that is what happens when people refuse my grace. They become no better than nightmare creatures. His somber words echoed in the silence of the great hall, making people lower their gazes. Effie trembled, pressed down by the force of his undivided attention. But then, she grinned and answered, her raspy voice sounding relaxed and carefree. She only said 2 words. Fuck off. Gunlog laughed and raised his hands in a helpless gesture. I rest my case. You all see how unrepentant this vile murderer is. There's not a drop of remorse left in her corrupted, rotten soul. That is why, with a heavy heart, I have to sentence this once promising young woman to death. She has toned her for her crimes, and leaving her alive would put you, my wards, in danger. I am left with no choice. A hum of voices rose from the crowd. Slum dweller or an inhabitant of the castle, everyone was affected by his last words. Didn't you dare, bastard, kill that murderer. Effie, we're here, make her pay. Lady Nephis, you can't let them, kill her, kill all of them. Unaffected by this outburst of boiling emotions, Nephis put a-hand on Nephis' shoulder and looked at the Bright Lord with a cold expression. Staring directly at the golden mask, she frowned and said, her voice clear and loud. I object. The storm of voices suddenly grew quiet. Everyone turned to her, 2 kinds of expectation hiding in their eyes. One was full of hope, the other full of vicious glee. Gunlog tilted his head. Object. What do you mean? Her guilt has been proven without any room left for doubt. There is nothing you can do to change the outcome. He paused for a moment and then suddenly leaned forward, his insidious voice washing over the great hall like a wave. Well, unless, of course, Changing Star looked at them with dark resolve and lowered her chin stubbornly. Then, she said, I want to invoke the right of challenge. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 293 to 293, The Challenge. 994 words. An echoing silence fell on the great hall of the ancient castle. The fateful words had been spoken, and now there was no turning back. For better or for worse, Gunlog tilted his head and stayed quiet for a few moments. Then, the sound of his laughter rolled over the crowd. The right of challenge. Oh, that old thing. You are awfully fond of that tradition, it seems. Not even a full year since you have arrived under my roof, and I had the pleasure of hearing you say those words twice. Insolent girl. He paused for a few moments and then leaned forward. His voice suddenly turned cold, full of dark undertones. Tobahonest, I am very tired of your insolence, Changing Star. Before Nephis could answer, the Bright Lord suddenly rose from his throne, towering above the crowd like a statue cast from pure gold. Then, He took a leisurely step forward and began descending the stairs of the dais. With each step, the sound of his serpentine voice resounded, growing lower and lower, until it turned into a fiendish, wrathful growl. Your little games were fun at first, but the more I observed your clumsy attempts at playing the hero, the more disgusted I became. I couldn't believe how naive, self-righteous, and stupid you turned out to be. It made Messick, it made want to do things that I promised myself to never do again. Ah, I expected better from the daughter of the immortal flame. To disappoint Mesothrofly. His growl reverberated through the great hall and then abruptly disappeared. A moment later, Gunlog suddenly threw his head back and laughed brightly. Oh, but then it at me. I was such a fool. You fooled me so beautifully. Brilliantly done, Changing Star. Please, do accept my compliment. After I saw the real you, it was such a joy to watch your performances. He left the stairs and stepped on the marble floor of the throne room. The crowd of the castle inhabitants parted in front of him, people hurrying to get as far away from the oppressive aura of the golden armor as he could. The Bright Lord sighed. It's sick a shame that all of this will have to stop now. You see, while I can help but applaud your effort, in the end, you still turned out to be just another fool. He glanced at Effie and asked, his voice full of mockery. A challenge. I didn't think it's your place to demand such a thing. You are not the one accused of the crime, after all. If someone has to invoke the right of challenge, it should be Effie herself. Didn't you think? Nephis gritted her teeth, struggling to remain poised under the assault of the psychic pressure. Refusing to turn away from the polished mirror of the Bright Lord's face, she said. Quote. It's just like one of your minions said. I am responsible for the actions of my people. Any crime they commit, is my crime. Gunlog watched her, his expression hidden. Neff's pale face was reflected in his mask, staring back at her with merciless grey eyes. After a while, He spoke. Sound logic. Who are you going to challenge, then? She hesitated for a few moments, then said steadily. Whoever it was that passed the guilty verdict. The Bright Lord chuckled. Oh, but by the same logic, that would be me. She smiled darkly and glared at them, white flames dancing in her eyes. Then you are the one challenge. Her words resounded in the great hall, sending hundreds of people gathered there into a state of stunned shock. So, this is it. Sunny looked at the crowd of stunned people, mentally separating them into two groups. Those who were going to Bethreed and those who were not. Regardless of how the fight between Nefis and Gunlog ended, the small enclave of humans living in the Dark City was going to descend into utter chaos. If Changing Star was killed, her followers would make her into a martyr and go insane. The host would not just let them off, either. If the Bright Lord fell, no matter how much Ofabastard Gunlog was, he was also the glue that held this whole place together. Without Adarant enforcing some semblance of order, no matter how ghoulish, things would get really ugly really fast. Who was going to stop the nightmare creatures from wiping the humans out then? In any case, there was going to be bloodbath. But he was done worrying about these matters. In the upcoming mayhem, Sunny's goals were very simple. Remain alive, protect Nefis, make sure that she becomes the new tyrant of the Dark City. So that she could carve the way back to reality for a few lucky survivors. If she doesn't right here and now, of course. In the silence that enveloped the Great Hall, the Bright Lord laughed and tilted his head, staring at Changing Star from behind his golden mask. Then, he said, how audacious. I wonder what gives you the confidence to dare challenge me. Various people have tried to kill me, you know. I have a little hobby, actually, collecting their skulls. Come to think of it, your pretty head would look really well in my collection. Suddenly, her raised a hand and gestured to his forehead. Don't tell me that it's all because of that little toy that you took off the First Lord's corpse. Oh, no, that would be terrible. You didn't really think that one powerful memory would be no toad feed me. Nefis lingered for a while, glaring at Gunlog. Then, she said evenly, my bare hands would be no toad feed a worm like you. The memory is just to make it quicker. Gunlog stared at her for a moment, and then chuckled. Great, this is great, such spirit, I will really enjoy breaking you, Changing Star. When this is done, Hef flexed his shoulders and said, his voice sending shivers into the hearts of hundreds of people gathered in the hall. Alright, I accept your challenge. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 294 to 294, Song of Steel. 986 words. The great hall of the bright castle grew silent and still. However, that stillness was not tranquil, but like a predator that fell low to the ground, ready to explode into a violent lunge to tear its prey apart. The sleepers pressed themselves against the walls, giving Changing Star and the Bright Lord space for their battle. Effie was dragged away from the middle of the hall by two guards, and now, there was nothing but emptiness separating the two fighters. From one side of the hall, the 5 lieutenants, Gemma, Tessai, Kido, Sishin, and Haruz, were looking at their master with complicated emotions. On the other side Ofit, Kai, Castor, and the leaders of the outer settlement hunting parties were doing the same. Cassie was also there, her hand resting on the hilt of the quiet dancer. There was a grim, somber expression on her beautiful face. Sunny glanced at the blind girl, and then turned to the center of the throne room. Two people were standing opposite each other there. One was a tall man encased in a strange golden carapace that followed the lines of his mighty body. The other was a young woman in an elegant plate armor forged of white metal. There was a subtle similarity between them. Both were emanating a striking, compelling sense of power and confidence that very few people ever possessed. Both were fearsome and deadly. Both were at the apex of their kind. However, this was where the similarity ended. This doesn't look good, Sunny thought, evaluating the two fighters. Heck knew better than anyone what Nefis was capable of, but even then, the sight of her facing Gunlog made a deep scowl appear on his face. The Bright Lord was much taller than her and weighed probably twice as much as Changing Star. He was stronger, had longer reach, and much more experience in slaughtering people. That was not even considering the damned golden armor of his. Even with the miraculous augmentation of the Dawn Shard, Nef's silver sword could barely be considered red at the same power level Asan ascended weapon would have been. That was still a whole rank below Gunlog's Strand Echo. Trying to break through that armor was going to be Shard's cracking the shell of a carapace centurion with a sword forged from mundane steel. Incredibly hard, if not impossible. And unlike the carapace Ophas scavenger, the golden echo did not seem to have a weak spot. At that moment, sparks of light appeared in the air in front of Changing Star. The silver longsword appeared in her hand, and she pointed it to the ground, for now. What weapon is that bastard going to use? That would decide a lot. Sunny was sure that Gunlog possessed an arsenal of powerful memory weapons. But how powerful were they exactly? He glanced at the Bright Lord, expecting to see the same sparks swirling around his hands. However, there was none. Instead, the liquid gold flowed forward and assumed the shape of a heavy battle axe, which Gunlog then grasped and leisurely put on his shoulder. The polished mirror of his mask reflected the slight frown that appeared on F's face. Damn it, the weapon the Bright Lord was going to use was also a part of his echo, and Asik possessed the quality of a transcended weapon. It was going to cut through the Starlight Legion armor without much effort. This I-7 worse than imagined. As Sunny gritted his teeth, Gunlog said in a serpentine, insidious voice. Any last words, Changing Star? Nefis tilted her head a little and remained silent for a while. Her helmet weaved itself from strings of light, hiding her face completely, with only calm gray eyes visible through the crack of the visor. Finally, she answered with only one word, her usually even voice full of furious contempt. Quote. Traitor. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. People were guessing what exactly she meant by that, but Sunny suspected that he was the only one who knew. Nef wasn't accusing Gunlog of betraying his fellow humans or causing the deaths of numerous young men and women. She was accusing him of betraying the true duty of the awakened and submitting to the nightmare spell instead of fighting it to the bitter end. In her mind, that was a far greater crime. The only crime, even. The Bright Lord laughed. That's too bad. I heard that one before. And then, without wasting even a fraction of a second, he suddenly exploded forward in a terrifying, lightning-fast lunge. The shift between peace and violence was so instant and swift that most people gathered in the Great Hall did not even realize what was happening until a few moments later. With each of Gunlog's strides, the floor of the throne room shook a little. He flew at Nefis like a furious giant made of gold, swinging his battle axe with both incredible agility and horrible force. She barely reacted in time, shifting her body and raising the sword to deflect the killing blow to the side. However, then something unexpected happened. The shaft of the battle axe suddenly elongated, the liquid gold comprising it flowing forward to assume a new shape. As a result, her deflection ended up being almost useless. With an awkward stagger, Changing Star reeled back. The very edge of the battle axe blade bit into the helmet of the Starlight Legion armor and effortlessly cleaved through it, leaving a shallow cut on her cheek. In the next moment, Gunloga's foot crashed into her ribs, sending the young woman flying through the air. Neffys landed an arrow and used one hand to stop herself from sliding on the marble floor. As drops of blood fell from beneath her helmet, merciless white flames ignited in her eyes. A moment later, she jumped forward and met the onslaught of the Bright Lord with an equal amount offering. The deadly song of clashing steel resounded in the ancient hall, like a premise of much greater bloodshed yet to come. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 295 to 295, The Duel. 1020 words. The breastplate off Neff's armor cracked from the force of Gunloga's blow and there was blood streaming from beneath her helmet, but that didn't slow Changing Star one bit. Jumping forward to meet the Bright Lord Assasso, she dodged the blade of the battle axe, twisted, and tried to deliver a strike off her own. A furious clangor of metal exploded in the silence of the great hall, both fighters moving with incredible speed, precision, and skill. In a span of several seconds, they exchanged numerous blows, but each was either deflected, dodged, or blocked. This terrifying clash was not at all like Sunny had imagined. There was nothing elegant, graceful, or elevated about it. All there was barbarous violence and cruel brutality, each of the fighters doing everything in their power to break, cripple and kill their opponent. Their voices sounded like that of wild beasts, partially from the incredible strain of the duel, but also told out the suffocating bloodlust and murderous intent that were drowning their minds. That was not to say that any one of them had lost control of their thoughts and actions. Both were cold-blooded killers and knew how to remain calm in the throes of the most terrible rage. A few seconds later, Gunlog and Neffys disengaged and staggered away from each other, letting the spectators draw in shaky breaths. The Bright Lordess' golden armor was pristine and unscathed. Neffys, however, had several bloody cuts on her body, the black material encompassing it torn and ripped. Another crack appeared on off her pauldrons. She glanced at it briefly and then indifferently turned back to watch her enemy. Everyone in the throne room, in one way or another, was thinking about the same thing, a cold and sickening feeling slowly spreading through their chests. How would they fare in such a fight themselves? The answer was simple: they would have been long dead, eviscerated in mere seconds beyond of these awesome fighters. Everyone felt death breathing down their necks. Among all the people watching their fight, however, there were two who observed Changing Star's every move with a special kind of attention. They were Sunny and Castor. Their reasons for studying how Neffys fought were entirely different, but also almost the same. Just a second of rest, and the two fighters lunged at each other once again. This time, however, their behavior was different. The first clash was just a test to gauge what the enemy was capable of. Now, they were not holding anything back, throwing everything they had at the enemy. At least that was how it seemed. Changing Star's sword suddenly flashed with brilliant radiance. Removing one hand from the hilt, she grasped the incandescent blade with her armored gauntlet at the middle to better control its tip and raised it to shoulder level. With Gunloga's ability to change the length of his weapon at will and almost impregnable armor, this grip was more advantageous. The Bright Lord absorbed the battle axe back into his armor. Then, two straight blades grew out of his forearms, creating weapons that resembled long, heavy punching daggers. They clashed once again, this time with even more fury. The people pressing themselves into the walls of the throne room trembled. Neffys seemed to abandon a lot of her defense, willing to take much bigger risks to obliterate the enemy. The reach of her sword was much shorter now, but the silver blade also grew much more agile and unpredictable. Gunloga's daggers were a true menace to resist, however. They flew at her from all sides, either in tandem or in a staggered rhythm, making it hard for the young woman to predict and deflect each blow. But she wasn't trying to. Changing Star seemed willing to receive many shallow wounds to get a chance to land a strike on her opponent. More bloody lacerations appeared on her body, the Starlight Legion armor barely holding together. But she achieved her goal, in the end. Catching one of Gunloga's daggers between the blade of her sword and her body, she forcefully twisted the sword sideways and caused him to turn his torso. Then, Neffys sidestepped and suddenly appeared behind the Bright Lord, with a fraction of a second left before he could turn around and defend himself. Her incandescent sword finished its arc high above her head, and, changing back to the standard grip, she brought it down with all her strength on Gunloga's shoulder. The radiant white blade flashed through the air and bit into the golden armor. And then, it slid fruitlessly off its bright surface, not leaving even a scratch on it. Damn eagle. In the next moment, Gunlog threw the sword to the side with one arm and delivered a terrifying blow with the other, his dagger aimed at Neff's face. She managed to turn her head at the last moment, avoiding instant death, but was still caught by the enemy's beast. The impact was so strong that Changing Star was thrown backward several meters. The helmet had shattered completely, revealing a pale, bloody face, with bits of metal piercing the skin. She rolled several times and came to a stop, then rose to her feet with some effort. The white flames dimmed a little, and there was a dark, disoriented emotion in her eyes. The gem of the dawn shard shone gently right above them, illuminating Neff's wounded face. A moment later, she dismissed what little remained of the helmet and stared at Gunlog with resentment, blood running from the cuts on her cheeks. The Bright Lord laughed and made a step toward Changing Star, his voice echoing under the roof of the great hall like a death sentence. What? That was all. Neffys did not answer. Instead, she placed both hands on the blade of her sword, holding it with its hilt and crossguard up, like a makeshift mace. The radiance of the silver sword spread to encompass all of it. But it didn't stop there. Sunny opened his eyes wide. What? The furious white flames spread from the sword to Changing Star's hands, her arms, and then devoured her figure completely. But they weren't burning in the white, cracked metal of the Starlight Legion armor. Instead, the brilliant radiance was emanating from her skin. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 296 to 296, Creature of Light. 1,239 words. Sunny stared at the shining figure in front of him, a myriad of thoughts appearing in his mind. With her skin emanating blinding white radiance, Neffy's looked beautiful and pure, asked how untouched by the imperfections of the mundane world. Wreathed in light, she was like a heavenly angel that descended into the mortal realm. The sight of it was both breathtaking and terrifying. It was also eerily similar to the image of the radiant creature he had seen on the walls of the ancient mine. Especially with the gem of the dawn shard burning on F's forehead like a third eye. But that wasn't what gave Sunny pause. How is this possible? But then, why wouldn't I be possible? At the start of their journey, he had guessed that Changing Star's aspect was of the divine rank, just like his. Her powers seemed tobable to either augment memories or hell, while his own could base to scout, enhance memories, or augment Sunny himself. Because Neffys had never used the white flames to achieve that last effect, he had assumed that she was incapable of doing so, and thus her aspect, while powerful, was less versatile. But augmenting herself was exactly what Neff was doing right now. Sunny knew it instantly. She wrapped her body in light just like he had wrapped his own body in the shadow countless times. With this enhancement, her physical prowess had to grow exponentially. Had she always been capable of doing so and hid that facet off her aspect intentionally, or was this something she learned how to do only after growing more powerful and absorbing hundreds upon hundreds of soul shards in the labyrinth? That question was going to remain unanswered, at least for now, because the battle between Changing Star and the Bright Lord was far from over. Just like Sunny suspected, with her body wreathed in light, Neffy suddenly became much stronger and faster. If before she was visibly weaker and slower than Gunlog, even if not by much, now, it seemed the other way around. She dashed toward the enemy, batted away one of the daggers, and delivered a crushing blow right to the polished mirror mask. This time, there was a slight mark left on the surface of the golden armor by her sword. The two of them became locked in a ferocious battle, dozens of attacks flying at each fighter. The clangor of metal grew in volume, turning into an almost deafening cacophony. Changing Star was fighting with abandon, more and more wounds accumulating on her radiant body. However, she also managed to land several more blows, each striking at the golden mirror of the Bright Lord's face. Slowly, a hint of a crack started to appear on its surface. Sunny also noticed that her wounds weren't healing. It seemed as if Neffys was only capable of supporting two effects at the same time, one augmenting her sword, the other her body. To summon the healing power of the white flame, she had to sacrifice one or the other. But she was unwilling to. A few moments later, it seemed as how Gunlog was slowly starting tallest ground. His enemy was just too fast, powerful, and ferocious. More and more strikes landed on the golden armor, and although it seemed to hold, for now, it was clear that the continuous blows were taking a toll on both the Bright Lord and his echo. However, the golden serpent had a few tricks up his sleeve, too. When the momentum of the fight began to favor Neffys, he suddenly chuckled and turned his face to catch her reflection in the mirror mask. A second later, the sound of muffled groans could be heard escaping from the mouths of hundreds of people. The psychic pressure emanated by the Bright Lord suddenly increased manifold, throwing some people to the ground and making others stagger. Sunny saw blood flowing from people's noses, eyes, and mouths. He himself also felt it and gritted his teeth, struggling to remain standing. Almost failed. Changing Star, who was at the center and the true target of the mental assault, let out a pained yelp and staggered. That was the moment when Gunlog stepped forward and stabbed her through the chest with one of his daggers. As long blade pierced the lithe body of the young woman and exited from her back, he said in a calm and friendly voice. There, that's enough. Goaty now, stupid girl. Then, he twisted the dagger, making her scream once again. Neffy stared at them, blood flowing from her mouth. Then, she raised her sword and hit him in the face with the pommel, again and again, until a small crack finally appeared on the surface of the mirror mask. But the crushing wave of mental pressure did not go away. Instead, it only increased. Gunlug laughed. Are you done? No. Well, let me help you then. His second dagger flashed through the air, slashing Neffy's across the wrist. With the tendons cut, the silver sword fell from her hand, its radiance dimming. Neffys used her other hand to push the Bright Lord away and slid off the blade of the dagger, then staggered away, eventually falling to her knees. The white radiance emanated from her body grew brighter, and the wound on her body began to heal. A low groan escaped from her lips. Gunlug approached the kneeling young woman, laughing. Did you think I wouldn't know about that little trick of yours? Go ahead and heal. See where it gets you. With that, he grabbed her by the neck and stabbed her again, reopening the terrible wound that had just closed once again. How's that? Come on, he'll eat again. With a ferocious growl, he continued stabbing her, over and over, his hand quickly becoming painted red with blood. Oh, this is really fun. But a bit tiring. How about I just cut off your pretty head right now and end this? Neffy spat some blood and turned her head to face him. And then she closed her eyes. Back when they had first arrived in the Dark City, Sunny had noticed that Cassie wasn't affected by the psychic pressure of the golden armor at all. From that, he deduced that the source of the mental assault was not the armor itself, but the golden mirror OFIT's face, or, to be exact, seeing your reflection in it. After returning from the castle, he had shared that insight with Neffys. It seemed that she remembered it. With her eyes closed, Changing Star raised her hands and grabbed the Bright Lord that was strangling her by the shoulders. Then, she used her whole body to deliver a devastating blow to his face, the gem of the crown of dawn hitting Gunlug right where his nose should have been. Finally, the surface of the golden mirror cracked and shattered. Through the small breach, a blue eye full of murderous joy was revealed. Shocked by the sudden blow, Gunlog staggered away. You bitch. The daggers were instantly absorbed into the golden armor, replaced by the heavy battle axe again. But he didn't get the chance to sit. With her eyes still closed, Neffy swiftly turned to the sound of his voice. Then, she raised her hand, opened her fist, and blew on it. In the next moment, a cloud of red sand shot from her palm and enveloped Gunlog. Sunny stared at Tight in shock, an expression of sudden recognition appearing on his face. Heck knew the look of that cloud all too well. It wasn't sand, it was the blood flower pollen. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 297 to 297, Red Flower. 1065 words. The red cloud enveloped Gunlog, seeping through the crack in his helmet. A second too late Toriak, the Bright Lord reeled away, but not before inhaling the pollen of the nightmarish flower. Sunny didn't know when and how Neffys had gotten it, but Heck knew that Huey had mistaken. This was the pollen of the blood flower, the grisly parasitic blossom that he himself had the misfortune of inhaling once, a long time ago. The memory of the bloodthirsty red flowers growing through his lungs sent shivers through Sunny's entire body. Back then, the only reason for why he had not become a host for the insidious nightmare creature was because of the blood weave. Without it, he would have been devoured from the inside in mere minutes. And now, the Bright Lord was going to fall to the same fate. She really did it. The rest of the sleepers gathered in the Great Hall did not know that Gunlog was already as good as dead, however. Including the tyrant himself. Bending over in a fit of violent coughing, he growled. What have you done, Tome, bitch? Neffys was still where he had dropped her, kneeling on the floor. Her armor was shattered and torn, with rivers of blood streaming down the cracked white metal. The brilliant radiance off her skin had been extinguished, but there were incandescent flames burning under it. The horrible wounds on her chest were slowly closing, and the lacerations on her face were already gone, leaving it just as perfect as it had been before. That face, however, was bloodied and pale, contorted in an expression of terrible agony. In her eyes, however, there was dark malice. A chorus of whispers rolled through the crowd when they witnessed the ghastly wounds healing themselves. Bathed members of the host Dorothy slum dwellers, all of them had two words want their lips. Immortal flame, and then someone shouted, their voice full of stunned awe. This ice the blessing of the fire. Deaf to all Ofit, Changing Star moaned and slowly rose to her feet. Then, she struggled to look at the Bright Lord and said, her voice shaking from pain. I killed you. Through the crack in the golden mask, Sunny saw Gunlog's blue eye first narrow and then suddenly open wide. In the next moment, the Bright Lord began coughing again. This time, a suppressed scream escaped from his lips. Single quote ... It's about to start. Sunny shifted a little, subtly positioning himself closer to Castor. Gunlog, meanwhile, staggered and groaned. There was blood dripping from beneath his broken mask. Then, a shaky laugh resounded in the throne room of the ancient castle. Ah, did you really? What a surprise. Head dropped his battle axe, which then turned into a puddle of liquid gold and merged with the strange armor. Head took a step toward Neffys, but then swayed and fell to knee. For a few moments, the Bright Lord remained motionless. Then, his body convulsed, more blood spilling through the cracks in the visor of his golden helmet. A muffled scream could be heard once again, full of tortuous pain. Hundreds of people were watching him, stunned, their eyes full of disbelief, anger, and terror. The Bright Lord raised his head and glanced at Neffys, then hissed. What a joke. I can't be like this. Changing Star looked down on him, her face cold and motionless. There was no triumph or gloating in her eyes. But there was also no mercy. Turning away, she hesitated for a moment and then said, her voice strangely gentle. Quote ... Rest easy now. Your nightmare is over. Gunlog stared at her in disbelief, and then suddenly laughed. There was a disturbing, gurgling sound coming from somewhere deep in his throat, asked how he was drowning in blood. Good, this ice too good. Yours is, only starting, though. With that, Hes slowly rose and then turned away. Swaying, the Bright Lord took one step forward, then another. The crowd watched silently as he arduously made his way to the steps that led to the throne of white marble and climbed them, blood spilling from the cracks in his helmet, his golden armor flowing and swirling around his body in a state that resembled panic. Finally, Gunlog reached the dais and fell on his throne, looking down on the great hall of the ancient castle with a strange, wistful expression. Then, Hes strained to say something, but became twisted in a and coughing fit instead. In the end, he just whispered a few almost inaudible words and leaned on the back of the throne, his body relaxing. Sunny was perhaps the only one who had heard him, due to the fact that his shadow was hiding in the darkness of the alcove all along. I tried. In the beginning, I really did. This was what Gunlog had whispered. And then, he grew still. The Bright Lord of the Dark City was dead. Sunny knew it instantly because of the fact that the terrible psychic aura pressing him to the ground suddenly disappeared, letting all the people around him move and breathe free. Knowing what was about to come, he glanced at the far end of the great hall one last time. A corpse in golden armor was sitting on the throne, a beautiful red blossom appearing from the crack in his polished mask. A few moments later, the armor suddenly shined with white light and then disintegrated into countless sparks, revealing the man who had ruled this cursed place for many years with honor and fist. Gunlog was surprisingly handsome. Even though his face was covered in blood, it was easy to tell. He had a short beard and long blonde hair. One of his eyes was gone, eaten through by the blood flower, and the other was quickly turning glassy. What surprised Sunny the most, though, was how young he looked. It was hard to imagine the Bright Lord as anything but powerful and ageless, but in fact, he was no older than 27. Somehow, Sunny had forgotten that fact. Single quote ... Kids, all Ofusha are just lost kids. He didn't waste too much time thinking about that, though. Because in the next few moments, Tessai, who had been staring at this dead lord with his usual morose expression, turned around and looked at the crowd of slum dwellers, then at the members of the host. The giant lingered for a second and then said, his deep, dark voice reverberating through the ancient hall. Quote ... What are you waiting for? Kill them all. And then, everything descended into madness. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 298 to 298, Fire and Blood. 1190 words. The first guard to follow Tessai Sutter lunged forward, summoning his weapon, and fell to the ground, a heavy kunai suddenly appearing in his eye. Due to everyone's attention being drawn to the bloodied figure on the throne, no one noticed as Sunny moved his hand slightly, letting the prowling thorn fly. Huey sent looking at Gunlog, though. His eyes were drawn to Neffys, while his shadow watched Castor. When the Bright Lord died, something strange happened to Changing Star. Her eyes opened wide, losing focus, and then she swayed a little and fell to knee. Her body was busy rearranging itself after absorbing a huge amount of soul essence, which made Neffys vulnerable for a few moments. That was when Tessai had given his order, and that was when Sunny threw his kunai and killed the guard rushing to attack the slum dwellers. Someone screamed, and in the next moment, the great hall of the castle descended into chaos. Unnoticed by anyone, Castor suddenly turned into a blur. Not so fast. Sunny was thrown off his feet and awkwardly fell, his wrists screaming in pain. He had achieved his goal, though, even while falling, He saw the proud legacy rolling on the marble floor, tripped by the invisible string of the prowling thorn. A second later, hundreds of sleepers clashed against each other, their suppressed rage, bloodlust, and murderous resentment finally exploding into a storm of violence. The white marble was instantly painted red with blood. The guards slaughtered indiscriminately, their powerful memory armaments and training giving them a vast advantage over the disorganized crowd of slum dwellers. But they weren't killing just those who came from the outer settlement. In the panic and havoc that engulfed the throne room, differentiating friend from foe was not an easy task. Sunny saw several artisan assistants fall to their blades, as well as Seifu unlucky people who had paid a heavy tribute in exchange for the promise of safety. With Gunlog gone, that safety was now gone, too. Eaglemost seemed asked how the guards didn't care who they killed, or were even glad to bell it off the chain. Even if there were those among them who had preserved some vestiges of conscience, now, it was utterly gone, devoured by the crowd instinct and the exhilaration of being free from all restraints. Their faces were contorted with ferocious grimaces, and their eyes burned with rage, hatred, and tenebrous joy. This was perhaps the most disturbing and frightening thing that Sunny had ever seen, and he had seen some of the most chilling horrors the dream realm had to offer. How can humans doth this to their humans? But that question was moot, and also hypocritical. Humans were indeed the most adaptable of creatures. When they needed to, they were easily able to avoid their victims of the status of a human being, thus absolving themselves of any guilt or sin. Why feel guilty for slaughtering cattle? Creatures worse than cattle, even. Hateful pests. Sunny had practiced that simple mind trick himself in the past. These thoughts only took him a fraction of a second. Jumping to his feet, Sunny summoned the midnight shard and dashed toward Neffy's. The slum dwellers, meanwhile, came to their senses and met the assault of the host with as much fury and bloodlust. Even though they were less experienced, well-fed, and armed, their resolve and exalted fury made up for that. Protect Lady Neffy's. Kill the bastards. Judgment. The two forces clashed, eviscerating anyone who had the misfortune of being stuck between them. Screams of terror and pain filled the great hall. The floor turned slippery with blood, and dead bodies piled on it, staring into emptiness with wide eyes. Sunny saw the scarred hunter from before dive under the strike of a young guard and drive the tip of his sword into the enemy's throat. He saw several hunters of the host lunge at Effie, who had easily tore the rope that bound her arms and met them with a ferocious grin, the beautiful bronze spear weaving itself from sparks of light in her hands. He saw Tessai crushing a random sleeper's skull with a heavy mace. The poor youth was only guilty of getting in his way. He saw people screaming in fear as he tried to flee the hall. Many fell on the floor, and were then crushed under the feet of the panicking crowd. The problem was, he didn't see Castor. Arriving near Neffy's, Sunny batted someone's sword away and then punched his opponent in the face, causing him to fly back with a pained scream. He looked around, trying to notice the proud legacy, his mind cold and collected. And there, He saw him. Castor may have had plans to kill Changing Star at the moment of her weakness, but thanks to Sunny's subtle intervention, he had lost that chance. Now, the legacy had bigger problems on his plate. With the enchanted Jian in his hand, he was fighting none other than Gemma, the leader of the hunters. No matter how strong and skilled Castor was, this was not an opponent that would go down easily, if at all. He couldn't extricate himself from that fight without risking being killed. Well, that problem seems to be solved, but now, there was another. Much bigger one. Back at the steps leading up to the White Throne, Haru's was standing with his back turned to the slaughter below, a strangely disoriented expression frozen on his face. Sunny could see his face because the shadow never left the darkness of the alcove, watching the dreadful hunchback's every move. Haru's was staring at Gunlog's dead body, his glassy eyes confused and empty. But then, slowly, a dark and deadly emotion appeared in them. Turning around, he studied the great hall, not disturbed even a little by the bloody chaos, the clangor of steel, and the scores of people dying in front of him. And then, his gaze fell on Neffy's. Crap. At that moment, both Kai and Cassie appeared by Sunny's side. Turning to them, he gestured to Changing Star and yelled, "Protect her." At the dais, Haru's tilted his head, piercing Changing Star with a murderous gaze. Slowly, his face contorted, turning bestial and terrifying. Pure hatred and insanity burned in his eyes, making anyone who accidentally glanced in his direction shudder. With a low growl, the hunchback took a step forward and outstretched his hand, ready to summon a weapon. But in the next second, someone crashed into him at full speed. Even though Haru's had dodged the flying blade at the last moment, the force of the impact was such that both men flew back, into the darkness behind the throne. Breaking through a wooden hatch that was hidden there, Sunny and Haru's rolled down a long flight of stone stairs and left the havoc of the great hall behind. A few moments later, they landed on the floor of a wide corridor and were thrown away from each other. Sunny twisted his body to regain his balance and used the midnight shard to stop himself from sliding even farther away. Then, he rose to his feet and looked darkly at Haru's, who was similarly just standing up. A cold glint appeared in his eyes. Just like Sunny had expected, today, one of them was going toady. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 299 to 299, Twisted Reflection. 1043 words. Out in the great hall of the ancient castle, the air was full of screams and clangor of steel, with rivers of blood being spilled on the white marble floor. But in the wide corridor Sunny and Haru's had found themselves in, the havoc that reigned above seemed muffled and distant. It was just the two of them here. Picking up the midnight shard from the cold stones, Sunny flexed his shoulders and looked at the hunchback. There was a dark, icy fire burning deep within his eyes. How wonderful, we're finally alone. The hunchback tilted his head and stared at them with his glassy eyes, not saying anything. A slight smile appeared on Sunny's lips. What? No reaction? Well, fair enough. Allow me to introduce myself, then. My name is Sunny, and I've been craving to kill you for a long time. Haru's remained motionless, looking at them with the same indifferent, bored expression. A hint of anger appeared on Sunny's face. Taking a subtle step sideways and slightly turning his torso, he said in a casual tone. To tell you the truth, Haru's, I have killed many monsters. Some of them were nightmare creatures, and some were men. I killed a person or two, as well. But I have never done it out of malice. I've never enjoyed it, too much. He paused and then spat, his voice shaking. But I will enjoy killing you. Sunny grasped the hilt of the midnight shard with both hands and took a step forward, piercing the hunchback with a furious gaze. You embody everything that I despise. The mere fact of your existence offends me. You sicken me, and for that reason alone I am going to end you. You didn't deserve to live. Haru's blinked and continued staring at them, motionless. Sunny stopped a few meters away and snarled, frustrated at the lack of response. Do you have any idea what I had Toto, what I had to sacrifice, how many things I had to let go of to save myself from becoming someone's slave? And here you are, living a son of your own free will, bastard, what gives you the right? Who gave you the idea that you can breathe the same air as Sito? The hunchback finally showed a sign that he had heard Sunny. With a slightly irritated expression, he shook his head and said, Talk, talk, talk. You talk too much, little worm. Sunny grinned. A dangerous spark appeared in his eyes. Yeah, well, what are you going Toto about it? Haru smiled, too. His smile was cold, unnatural, and frightening. Break you apart. You will have Toti, anyway. All of you will. Sunny raised his eyebrows. Oh, really? Why ice that? The hunchback shrugged and outstretched his hand. Weaved from the sparks of light, a heavy chain appeared from the air, wrapped around his arm from wrist to elbow. Then, he grimaced and straightened his back as much as his deformity allowed him. Before, he seemed to be of the same height as Sunny. But now, Haru's towered above him almost as much as Tessai had, his twisted figure radiating a sense of vicious, bestial power. As two menacing lights ignited in his pale eyes, he growled. Because this ice thee will of the Lord. Sunny laughed. Lord, the bright Lord. I didn't want to disappoint you, fool, but your Lord is dead. Haru stared at them with sincere confusion. Then, a corner of his lips curled upward. With something that almost resembled pity, he said, Poor worm, you didn't even understand what loyalty means, do you? Alive or dead, it doesn't matter. Sunny snarled. You're right, I didn't understand. Finally, he raised his sword and prepared to attack. You know, I spent so much time trying to learn what your aspectability and flaw are. But now, I am glad that I didn't know. I didn't want to kill you using a trick. I just want to obliterate you. Haru's listened to him. A mocking grin appeared on his lips. And then, Sunny suddenly became blind. A moment before, Sunny was looking at the hateful figure of the fearsome hunchback. Then, suddenly, his sight was gone, replaced by nothing except for boundless darkness. Almost immediately, a monstrous blow sent him flying back. Sunny hit the wall of the corridor and then fell to the floor, leaving a trail of blood on the cold stones. His bones groaned, but held together, if barely. Haru's, who had hit him in the chest with a fist, the heavy chain wrapped around his knuckles, lunged forward with terrible speed, aiming to crush the enemy's skull under his boot. His movements were swift and utterly silent. To his surprise, though, the little wretch somehow managed to roll away and jump back, avoiding death by a hair's breadth. Sunny slid backward and rose to his feet, blindly swinging the midnight shard in a wide arc in front of him. The blade of the Tachi missed the murderous hunchback entirely, but bought him a second toe gather himself. Not that it was going to help. He was still blind. Of course, it'll make sense now. Sunny finally unraveled the mystery surrounding Haru's. He understood why so many sleepers, no matter how skilled and with no regard to the might of their aspect abilities, had been somehow rendered powerless and easily slaughtered by Gunaluga's executioner. He also understood why there were no witnesses to the countless murders that Haru's had committed. No one had ever seen him killing his victims. Their bodies were always found only after the slaughter was over. It was not because the terrifying hunchback was able to move like a ghost or possessed such great power that no one could even try to resist it. It was because his aspect ability could literally make people not see him. Or anything, for that matter. It didn't matter how skilled or mighty his opponents were. Once they were blind, all their technique and abilities were made useless. Killing a blind person was an easy task. It also did not matter if someone was there to see Haru's kill, as long as she wanted, he would remain unseen. That show the legend of the horrifying butcher was born. People were always more afraid of things that they couldn't see, after all. Sunny spat a mouthful of blood and grimaced. It was nice to reveal another secret. The question was, would he be able to survive knowing the truth? Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 300 to 300. Bright Lord's Slave. 1479 words. By twist off it, today, Haru's was facing possibly the worst opponent he could have faced on the Forgotten Shore, among the sleepers, at least. However, Sunny wasn't surprised. He had always felt that Han the murderous hunchback were destined to end up fighting each other to the bitter end. Before, he had thought that this was just intuition, but now Heck knew that his occasional and subtle premonitions were anything but random. All that time ago, he had already sensed that the two of them were connected by astring off it. Was Itsuge's surprise, then, that his aspect happened to counter that of Haru's to a large extent? And it'd counter it, although not completely. If anyone else was in Sunny's place, they would have been already dead. Robbed of their sight, very few people, even at all, could have resisted the furious assault of the terrifyingly strong hunchback. But Sunny wasn't just anyone. Even while blind, he had shadow sense on his side. While it wasn't the same as being able to see Haru's, by sensing the movements of his shadow, Sunny was able to predict his attacks with at least some level of precision. It wasn't perfect, though. At least he had not reached the level where this form of perception could fully replace vision. So, now, Sunny had a choice to make. While his shadow was wrapped around his body, it gave him an incredible boost in strength, speed, and endurance. It wasn't able to provide him with a second pair of eyes, however. So he could either continue to rely solely on shadow sense and keep this boost, or let the shadow go and fight Haru's with just his own strength while being able to see. Decisions. Sensing the hunched shadow of the murderous butcher lunge forward, Sunny dodged left and heard something whistle past his temple with terrible speed. A fraction of a second later, and his skull would have been crushed by the links of the iron chain wrapped around his enemy's feast. He missed the hunchback's other hand, though. His wrist was suddenly caught in an iron grip and twisted, forcing Sunny to yelp and let go of the midnight shard. Another second, and his bones were going to shatter. Following the direction of the twist, Sunny performed an aerial cartwheel to save his arm and reluctantly ordered the shadow to slip off his body. Asha landed on the stones. Sunny was finally able to see again. Haru's was holding him by the wrist with one hand, his other raising to deliver a crushing blow. Sunny doubted that there would be anything left of his face if he were Tolo that blow Toland. He still held the midnight shard in his free hand. Turning the Tachi upward, Sunny thrust it in the direction of the hunchback's throat. A hint of surprise appeared in his enemy's eyes. Haru's changed the direction of his strike, turning it into a block instead. The razor-sharp blade bit into the links of the heavy chain wrapped tightly around his forearm and bounced off. However, that gave Sunny the opportunity to wrestle his wrist free and jump back. Despite the fact that his bruised hand was shaking, he put it back on the hilt of the Midnight Shard and faced Haru's once again. The hunchback titled his head and stared at Sunny with an amused expression. "Slippery worm, how are you doing that?" Sunny grinned. "Wouldn't you like talk now?" Then, he grimaced and added after a few moments of pained silence. Quote. "I can still see you thanks to me aspect." Haru's grinned. "Oh, good, it's nice of you to tell me." With that, he suddenly threw his hand forward. What is she doing? The distance between them was too large to land a punch. But in the next moment, Sunny realized his mistake. It was too late, however. The chain suddenly flew off the hunchback arm and instantly covered the distance between them. Before Sunny could react, it was tightly wrapped around the blade of the Midnight Shard. Then, Haru's pulled it back with tremendous force. Sunny could either allow himself to thrown to the floor right in front of the cruel executioner or let go of his sword. Heck was the second option. The Midnight Shard flew far away and fell on the marble floor with a melodious ringing. There was little hope of retrieving it, and Sunny doubted that Haru's was going to give him enough time to dismiss and summon the Tachi again. Indeed, almost instantly, the fearsome hunchback was already lunging at them, the iron hammers of his fists ready to break every bone in Sunny's body. "Goaty, bastard," Sunny growled and dashed forward. Dodging a deadly strike, he twisted his body and delivered a ferocious blow of his own. His fist connected to the hunchback's chin, making Haru's reel back. Sunny might have been lean and not as tall as most men, but he wasn't a weak outskirt kid anymore. The power of 900 shadow fragments, each earned in a deadly fight against unimaginable horrors, coursed through his veins. He was much stronger than he looked. Strong enough to shatter stones with his bare hands. And yet, he wasn't nearly as strong as Sheris. While shaken by the blow to the face, the hunchback didn't look seriously hurt. But his next strike almost made Sunny buckle. For a few short moments, the two of them became entwined in violent, barbarous combat. Using their fists, legs, and even teeth, they did anything in their power to destroy the enemy. Haru's fought with the measured skill of an experienced killer, while Sunny fought with the desperate, feral cunning that his cruel upbringing had taught him. The hunchback was at a dire advantage in that fight. With his tremendous might and much larger weight and reach, all he had to and it was to wrestle Sunny to the ground. Knowing that, Sunny had done everything in his power to avoid being grappled. Head twisted and moved, dodging the hunchback's large hands and delivering strike after strike. Soon, Haru's was bleeding from a half-dozen cuts on his angular face. Sunny, however, was in much worse shape. The hunchback's fists, and especially that damn chain of his, had left terrible marks on his body. The skin on his forehead was split open, and a stream of blood was flowing down his face. Usually, that would have blinded a person, but both of his eyes were already blind. He was using his shadow to see. Single quote. How ironic. Still, it was just a matter of time before Sunny made a mistake. And very soon, headed. Sunny was only a fraction of a second late, but it was all Haru's needed to land one of his wide palms on his shoulder. Then, he gripped it with enough strength to make Sunny's bones groan, thus robbing the enemy of his only advantage, mobility. As Sunny's eyes opened wide, the hunchback grinned. Quote. Time toady, little worm. With that, he threw him against the wall, making a net of cracks streak through its stone surface. Hurt and disoriented, Sunny felt something cold and inevitable grip his neck. Looking his victim right in the eyes, Haru squeezed Sunny's neck and smiled. Good, it is good that you can see. Usually, they don't. Such a pity. Sunny raised his fist and hit the hunchback in the face, but to no result. He couldn't find the proper purchase or move his torso to deliver a proper blow. Regardless, he tried again, then again. The skin on the face of his strangler split, letting more blood flow, but Haru's just continued smiling, looking at them with fascination. Good. This is so good, so good. Sunny weakly raised his hand again, but lingered, hesitating before trying to hit the hunchback again. With what little air remained in his lungs, he wheezed. Hey, bastard, do you remember how he told you that it didn't want a trick to kill you? Haru simply grinned. Well, that was a trick. At the same time, he struck the hunchback in the face again. Knowing that these punches were not strong enough to change anything, Haru's didn't react. But this time, a ghostly blade suddenly appeared in Sunny's hand at the last moment. Unlike normal memories, this one weaved itself from nothing and almost instantaneously. Then, it pierced Haru's temple and sunk deep into his brain, killing him on the spot. The grin froze on the hunchback's lips. His eyes widened, then slowly turned glassy. His terrible grip on Sunny's throat weakened. Then, he crumpled to the ground like a broken mannequin, his empty eyes still open and staring into nothingness. Sunny fell to his knees and drew a hoarse breath. Die, you bastard. Die. A wicked, furious grin appeared on his face. Die and go keep your lord company in hell. Shaking, he used the wall to stand up and looked at the dead butcher with a strange mix of hatred, triumph, and contempt. After a while, he said, Didn't want todos and mean I want, you fool. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report.